you could lose the rights to your tickets.
Oh, wait. Huh.
So I decided.
They told me that if they have a game that if fans are not allowed, that they will give us the option of a refund.
Right, but you had to pay up front.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They've got my money.
Oh,
yeah.
they've got everybody's money. So you know what? I look at it this way. Next year, I won't have any bills for them.
Right.
So Rob, I see that we're live streaming. Have you posted the links? Okay, we're ready to go, Jeff.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well, happy, healthy. Let's get started. We got a lot on the agenda. Can everybody hear okay? Can you give me a thumbs up just so we can kind of get a feel for everybody good?
I've got a big telephone in the middle of my.
But we can't see you.
Me?
Yep.
Right, Jeff, I can't see you.
Back.
Well, in the
Good thing, Levi.
if you do the Hollywood squares, we are top left, second over.
Okay.
I have a big telephone in the middle of my screen. What caused that?
Dick, look over to the upper left and you should see a set of little boxes, little squares. Press that and it'll give you gallery view.
Wait, well, there's Mark. So which square is it? Just,
There should be an icon if you're on your iPad with a
I don't have an
series of
iPad.
squares.
I'm on a desktop. I see you when you speak and I see Levi,
Oh,
Mark,
Dick, you have it set to speaker view, so that when somebody speaks, then they pop up.
Okay, so how do you get that off of their speaker view?
I believe it's in the top left or top right, and if you go up, there will be something that looks like a little checkerboard, and if you click on that, then you'll see the checkerboard as opposed to the
Got
speaker
it.
view.
Got it. Now there's everybody.
Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We have a quorum, we can conduct business. We do have an 8:15 public comment period, but we'll keep pushing through till that happens. Minutes of previous meetings, did everybody get a chance to take a look at them? Is there any corrections, any questions?
At the last sentence of Mark's report, it talks about the widening of easements for fire, and it says litigation. I think that should say legislation.
Yes, that it should.
Anybody else? Do we get a motion to approve the minutes with that correction? So moved.
Move to
Motion by
approve.
Carl, and
Second,
a second by Liz. All those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Levi, you ready to give your report?
Yeah, I sent out both reports. That summary report, I believe, is in CTO. Anything, I have a few things to discuss that we can discuss in executive session.
Okay. Are those, Levi, are those listed on our agenda for the executive session?
Yes,
I
and
believe
then
one of
we'll
them is
add an
number
update
4, right?
on the litigation.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Levi? Okay, moving on. Mark?
Okay, you have my report. I'm going to make a couple of comments, and then if you have any questions, be happy to answer. Mountain Parks, or Mountain Family Center, we finally received the individual hand sanitizers that we had given the money to Fraser Valley Distributor or Distillery to make, and we are handing those out at our drive-through window here. And then Mountain Family Center got about 600 of them, and they are providing those with the packages of food that they give out.
Is that it, Mark?
No, they're a smaller bottle than that. under master meter, metering, you see what I had put in there. Staff also did a financial review, and Levi did a legal review of the issue. And if we would like to discuss that more, I would suggest that we do that when we get to the end in executive session, because of the sensitive nature of the information that we will share. Under the safety officer, we have we've had 3 rounds of interviews. We did the last section. We did a 2-person in-person interview. We have been close to offering the position twice. We actually made an offer the last time, and the individual declined. It had nothing to do with it. He just didn't feel like it was a good fit for him. We did become aware of, I was contacted by a recruiter that has helped a North Carolina cooperative identify and hire a safety coordinator. Right now on NRACA's website, there are 6 positions that are posted in addition to ours. And did have a conversation with the recruiter. Also, he gave us a contact person at the cooperative in North Carolina and had an hour-long conversation with them about the process that they went through. And they ended up with 10 candidates that he provided, 5 of which they interviewed. They selected one, and she said, the head of their HR said that there were a couple that were probably that they would hire if they hadn't hired the first person. So what I think we're going to do is move forward with seeing if we can get something with the recruiter to try and help us with this. Stan leaves next week, and we have no additional resumes on the horizon. And although it would be an expense to Mountain Parks to do this, the longer that we go without a safety coordinator, the more at risk we are. And also, since we're not paying Stan's salary, that would help to offset any costs that we have associated with a recruiter. And so at that point, I will stop and see if anybody has any questions.
Will Stan stay on?
No, they've been building a house in Texas. I believe it's outside of San Antonio. They got an offer on their house here, and that is closing. So he has said that if we are successful in hiring a candidate, he would come back for a week or so to kind of work with that person. But no, he's not willing to stay on any longer, because Brenda, his wife, is also retiring. And so next week on the, I believe 16th is their last day. Moving on to the RESP documents, I did the report, I sent it out, and I said as of the 1st, we hadn't gotten the documents. On the 2nd, we finally got the documents after badgering them for about 3 weeks. That is something that will be an action item that we have, and that will, once the board approves the resolution, then we can sign those documents, and we'll be able to access the funds associated with that.
Real quick on that, Mark, we did just add a couple documents to that this morning, so everybody should update their CTO for that later on.
Well, and I did see the email you sent yesterday, and I thought that both of those were already in there, but possibly not. But when we get to executive session, if everybody updates the call to order, then those documents will be there. Under the fiber backbone, talked about a meeting that we had with the Wireless Research Center. They have subsequently sent us a proposal, and I would also suggest that we discuss that in executive session. It contains some terms as to length and how they would actually go through the process of partnering with us. So we will wait for that unless somebody has any questions. The Winter Park, I did contact.
Mark.
Oh, go ahead, Dick.
On the backbone, I've been getting a lot of questions when I see people about who's doing what. They're reading things in the paper, and they're questioning, are we building the project? Is someone else building the project? They seem to think there's a lot of duplication going on because I don't think there's one message coming from one source. And I'm wondering whether we need to do something to clarify how that's coming about. That was the only question.
Are you talking about the Mammoth project or,
Well,
our project?
they're confused as to Mammoth, they're confused as to Thor, they're confused as to what we're doing, and now we're partnering, and they're just getting a lot of information, and people feel that maybe we're doing something that someone else is doing, and I didn't know at which point we ought to at least clarify to the public what's going on. I think a lot of people are confused. I know sometimes I start reading these things, I'm wondering what stage, who's doing what. And I didn't know whether that might be a good idea to either send out some notification or something to our members or in the paper as to what is going on so that people have a clear understanding.
Okay, and I'll attempt to clarify. Last month, we did discuss, what we would be doing and what Mountain Parks is doing, and we would have a contractor that would build the fiber backbone. We are doing it in 2 phases. The first phase is Winter Park to Granby and over to Grand Lake and possibly to Hot Sulphur. The second phase is everything else. We are not at this juncture partnering with anybody. However, that will be part of the discussion in executive session from the proposal that we have received from the Wireless Research Center and SBA Communications. We can definitely put together something. We have talked about it a couple of times in my CCL articles, but we can put together something to see if we can get the local papers to, provide some additional information. What we specifically talked about at the last meeting was what Thor has done and that they have completed, and then whether or not that would serve the needs of Mountain Parks. And Joe provided his opinion on that, and we discussed that. And although the Thor project does have, I guess, a ring at this point, it does not provide what we at Mountain Parks would need to serve our needs. And going forward, what we would do is, for Mountain Parks, we would have a fiber backbone that would be used for internal purposes only. If we choose to partner with somebody, they would use some of the dark fiber that is going to be available, and they would be working to provide more of a fiber to premise or wireless to premise internet service. And they would do it on a wholesale basis, and it would need to be non-discriminatory so that any ISP that currently operates here in Grand and Jackson counties, as well as the other areas that we serve, would be able to utilize that fiber to serve our members.
Okay, I'm clear on it. It's just that people out there don't have all of that information. And I thought, they say if Thor's doing it or Thor has it, why are we doing it? And I just think some clarification, if we could put something out, might be helpful so people aren't under the wrong impression. That was all.
No, and we will work to see if we can do that. Sometimes we put out press releases and the papers choose not to print them, but we'll put something together. I'll work with Rob to put something together. We can get some information out there to the membership.
Thank you.
And are there any other questions on that? And if not, I'll move on. Okay, the Winter Park land, at the last meeting, we had received a letter from Cliff Anderson, and I did contact him and gauged his interest. He expressed interest, but he was supposed to get back to me with, if he wanted to actually make an offer. He has not, and it's been about 2.5 weeks. But if you notice under the executive session, we will update the Winter Park parcel because we have received an offer, and we can discuss it in executive session, and the board can determine what they want to do with that. And I will tell you, the offer is not currently from Cliff, so. A couple of last things, and some that we will need to take action on. The employee recognition that we set up the fund, Jessica was our first recipient related to the healthcare change. She has done a yeoman's work related to this with educating our employees, and we started it July 1st. We have had a few bumps, which we are working through. She has done a great job coordinating with Frank at Strategic Health, and then with GPA, who is the third-party administrator, and ELAP, and all of the other folks that have to come together to make this work. I have had the experience of contacting them and had a really good experience. Others have contacted them and had less positive experience, but we're working through all of the issues related to that. And then the last three is under action items. We need to select delegates for the CFC special meeting, and it is for a bylaw change related to allowing them to do meetings via virtual type meetings. The NCSC annual meeting and the Tri-State annual meeting. And because, and NCSC, for those who might not know what it is the National Cooperative Services Corporation. Because the meetings are coming up prior to our next board meeting, the board will need to select a delegate, take action on that, and then ratify that action in August, because we didn't meet the deadline for being able to get it on the agenda and have 10 days notice. And with that, I will stop, and if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer them, and then we will bring on our first guest. Carl?
The Tri-State annual meeting was canceled. Weren't we told that last meeting?
The in-person meeting that they had scheduled for, it's not Thornton, it's the town above Thornton.
Cheyenne.
Well, no, but there was one where they were going to do it at the hotel. They canceled that, but then they sent out notice on August the 6th, which I sent to all the board members, and they have decided to do an in-person meeting in Cheyenne at, I think it's Little America, but there will be limited attendance available. Wyoming has less restrictive meeting requirements than does Colorado.
I'd vote for Carl. I did see they would like if possible, to have the current board member be the voting delegate.
Well, and we will get to that, but that's not until we get to the action items. But Carl, you had a question?
Yeah, you had some item in here about another entity interested in the community solar. Are you going to comment on that? Or?
I won't name them because we've had some conversations with them, but they haven't actually committed at this point. It is a quasi non-governmental entity that is building a large facility between here and Grand Lake. They want it to be LEED certified. They have 120 acres, and so they have more than enough space for us to be able to build the community solar. They're going to take up, I believe they said, about 15 acres with their facility of the 120. And they had reached out to us initially. I got back with them and talked with their project manager for the building, which will be built next year. And they're discussing it internally, but I think that we may be able to get more favorable terms on the either purchasing the land or long-term lease of the land if we are able to move forward with them.
Does it work within our system?
Yes. Yeah, the location is very close to one of our substations, and so it would work within our system.
And we wouldn't have to do any curtailment, would we, given the generation going into that sub?
Scott has done some analysis, and there is the possibility of, like, with his analysis, and it's not perfect at this point because it was kind of back of the envelope, a couple of days a year, but that is before we have that new facility and the load associated with it. So we believe that along with the growth of River Run and Smith Creek Crossing would we would be able to run it without any kind of curtailment.
I think that area certainly has a lot of promise. It's very sunny and it has good exposure.
Any other questions? If not, I will introduce Bryce Carter. He is with Solar United Neighbors. They had a presentation on Zoom, and they had I think it was six speakers, and I was one of them, and Barbara Vasquez was also one of them. And we talked about the things that Mountain Parks is doing. We talked about what the Green Power Committee is doing, and he's going to give us a presentation on what Solar United Neighbors is and the process that they're going through. And Rob, have we set him up to be host so he can share his screen?
Yeah, I believe I am set up. Let me, all right.
Okay.
All right, see, I'm still disabled actually, so.
And I see Rob furiously working, so he's about to set you up as the host.
Great.
Okay, you are now the host, Bryce.
Excellent, let's see. Can you all see my screen? Great.
Yes.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Bryce Carter. I am the Colorado Program Director with Solar United Neighbors. Solar United Neighbors, we are a nonprofit, vendor-neutral organization that helps people go solar, join together, and fight for energy rights. And just a little background of who we are. We started as a local movement in Washington, D.C. back in 2007. Walter and Diego there at the top picture in the slide wanted to create some type of change. They wanted to reduce their carbon emissions, and they realized that solar was a really effective way of doing it. So Walter ended up lobbying his mom to say, hey, let's figure this out. And she said, you know, we'll do it if we bring a bunch of neighbors together. And over 2 years, they did a lot of research in figuring out the process to go solar, what does it mean to do a group buy. And out of 50 of the neighbors, 45 of them actually went ahead and installed solar. Since that time, we formed as a national nonprofit organization in 2011, and we've become a leading organization for solar education and outreach. We've done over nearly 250 solar co-ops and nearly 5,000 installations. We have a network of over 150,000 people, and that continues to grow across the country. And so while we are consumer focused, solar does matter to utilities as well. And so when we look at the grid benefits of solar, storage, and electric vehicles, a couple of things I just wanted to highlight. You know, solar is able to reduce electricity demand. However, solar and/or storage can reduce those peak demand charges that you would see. It certainly offsets any fuel costs as well. It does ease stress on transmission systems, so it delivers like electricity right where the demand is. And with storage, you can provide grid balancing and even frequency services. And I think it's worth also noting that solar is able to provide community resiliency. So when we look at solar storage and EV infrastructure, it's able to help keep the lights on, buildings heated, and vehicles mobile, even in the case of major interruptions. And I think we saw some of the impacts of the 2013 floods where several communities were isolated for extended periods of time. And so when we think about mountain communities, it's definitely something to consider. And finally, there's economic security because solar is able to keep dollars in people's pockets, and so the bills can get paid. And we also know that in the solar industry, not everything is created equal. We definitely have seen some bad actors when it comes to installations or poor quality of equipment. And so as we implement our solar co-op process, we've been able to whittle down that 2-year original process from Anya all the way down to now 6 to 8 month process. And this is where we are with the Colorado Headwaters Solar Co-op. And again, I really want to thank Mike and Barbara for participating in our kickoff call a couple of weeks ago. We've actually hit about 30 members for the solar co-op, so we're really excited to get that rolling. And just yesterday, we actually released our RFP. So we're going to be accepting bids from installers. And then we're going to have a selection committee made up of our members. review, and then decide which installer to proceed with. And so you can see here, given the fact we're in the mountains, we want to try to get installs done before the winter. We're moving forward, and we hope to select an installer in the next couple of weeks, certainly by the end of the month or so. And then hopefully get those installs going through August and be able to take care of everybody. But it is completely free to participate within the solar co-op. There's no obligation to install solar. So folks are able to see what those rates would be for them based on this group buy. And ultimately, when they have a contract in front of them, it's up to them whether or not they would want to sign. And so, yeah, so in terms of then making sure that we have a quality process, we provide a lot of education to the public. And so this is just an example slide where we talk about the technology of solar, how it works in your home, the solar co-op process, and then ultimately financing options available to folks. And so we did look at the information in terms of the dollar per watt pricing on average for the region, about $3. It's higher and lower depending on which market you're in. And based on the pricing from Mountain Parks, this is what we're able to provide folks, knowing that the installer, the dollar per watt price that they offer might be slightly different. And so I also want to emphasize, these are the selection committees of our members that meet. We facilitate the meeting, but ultimately they make the decision. So we really dig deep in terms of understanding what equipment and warranties are being offered, whether or not a local installer, it is a local installer is part of the consideration. We review customer reviews and Better Business Bureau. And so we really make a long, extended effort to make sure it's a quality review, and we make a very informed decision based on the needs of the solar co-op. And so when we talk about the Colorado Headwaters Solar Co-op, here's what we've been seeing from our members so far. Primarily, one of the top criteria that folks are looking for is having an installer that has experience and qualifications. And so 72% of people said that that was their top priority in terms of making sure that that is what we consider. It's also worth noticing in terms of the additional interest beyond solar, about 50% of our members so far are interested in electric vehicle chargers, and over 90% are interested or maybe interested in battery storage, which I think is a reflection of being a mountain community. So since Solar United Neighbors launched its Colorado program about 1.5 years ago, we've had over 106 people go solar with us all across the state, and we've had 782 kilowatts of installed capacity. So that means about $1.9 million that's invested into local communities. We've been able to create 12 jobs through this work. And you can see here with the Yampa Valley, just west of you all, we launched a co-op last year, and we were able to do wide community outreach from Steamboat Springs to Craig, and making sure that folks were both informed and then able to become a member and learn about what solar means for them. Then as we look forward to our programming and as we look ahead to what we want to implement, I wanted to emphasize one of our programs, which is called Solar for All. We launched our first Solar for All program in Washington, D.C. to serve low to moderate income households. And we were able to receive a grant where we implemented, I think it was about 70 or 80 installs within the local community. These were installs that they were able to own from day one, which was able to provide $23,000 of equity into their homes. The average age for those members was 59 years old. The median income was $31,000. And as you can see here that about half of the participants had very low income, so 0 to 30% AMI. And for most of these households, the top savings or what they did with those savings was being able to cover more basic necessities. And so we were able to see a lot of people have this opportunity to go solar and receive the benefits of it. And most of them would not have gone solar if it wasn't for a Solar for All program. And I wanted to highlight the story of Latoya Smith. She's a DC resident, and with Solar for All, not only is she able to achieve her goals of reducing her energy bills, but she's also into the lifestyle, being able to reduce her emissions and its benefits, as well as having her children embrace that and look forward to having their own solar system someday. Furthermore, once she had solar, then she got an electric vehicle, and she was just really grounded in the idea that she can power her vehicle and her home, being able to contribute not only to the economy, but also the issue of climate change. And I'll note that Solar United Neighbors, we had an internal survey that showed that solar homeowners were 67% more likely to own EVs than non-solar owners. And so in terms of collaboration, Solar United Neighbors, when we work within the local community, we do a lot of outreach and partnerships with various organizations. That's how, especially in rural communities, we want to connect, especially in the age of COVID. That's how we are able to have conversations with folks. And so I wanted to make an ask of Mountain Parks Electric to see if we can support ongoing collaboration and partnership. I want to invite the board members to join our Solar Co-op Steering Committee here in Headwaters area, as well as be involved in our State Advisory Council if you'd like to be on that as well. We also are going to continue our community outreach and education program. So we do provide information. We want to provide information on Electrify Everything, provide information on the rebates and other programs available to our members. And we would love to have help inviting Mountain Parks members to participate in the Solar Co-op and then collaborate on ongoing media campaign to make sure that we highlight the impacts that we're able to create. In addition, like I said, we are looking for opportunities around solar for all. So we would love to support low to moderate income households. And from what I've heard with the financial assistance to make energy investments with the Electrify Everything program, seems like a really awesome opportunity to be able to collaborate. So I look forward to learning more about where that's going to go and how we can provide support. And then finally, I did want to acknowledge that we are technically operating at a loss. We realize that for each of our co-ops is about $20,000 to implement. And because there was such strong interest in being able to get us started, and we wanted to be able to support the local community, we went ahead and launched unfunded because we didn't want to lose that momentum. So certainly within the local community, we are going to continue to pursue opportunities for funding and specifically also any opportunities for low to moderate income support. So if there's any opportunities that we could collaborate on to pursue that funding, we'd love to be in touch for that as well. And so with that, I'll take a pause and would love to answer any questions that you all have. My contact information is on here as well. Thank you so much.
Anybody have any questions for Bryce?
All right, how many people have signed up so far, and how many people typically move forward and install solar batteries or EV chargers with a typical co-op?
Yeah, great question. So right now we're about 30 members for the Headwaters, Colorado Headwaters Solar Co-op, and that is serving the Grand and Jackson County area. We see a typical co-op have between 100 to 150 members, depending on how long we have it open, as well as the installer's capacity. And about 20 to 30% of our members do proceed with the install. It depends on the region in terms of battery as well as EV charging infrastructure. I imagine we'll probably see a higher rate because I know that you have the electric vehicle charging rebates with the co-op. So I imagine we'll see more people take advantage of that and other opportunities with the rebates that you all have. So it's too early to know what those rates will be, but I'm excited to see what happens.
Bryce, how do we, if we have somebody that's interested in being on your steering committee, how do we go about that?
Just email me and I'll be adding you to our bi-weekly meetings, and that's as simple as that.
Okay.
We'd love to have you.
And so if any of the board members are interested, if you just want to email me, then I can send on the information, or you can email Bryce directly.
Question for staff. Are we seeing, we're seeing Mark sent out the Electrify Everything first print. And are we seeing some of the Electrify Everything interest being driven by Solar United, or are we seeing interest in Solar United being driven by Electrify Everything, or is it both?
And I think the answer is we don't know. We currently have 15 of our members that are moving forward with applications trying to get a bid from a contractor under the Electrify Everything program. Those are not all solar. There are a couple that are the heat pumps. There is one that is insulation. And we had more people that have actually applied or expressed interest, but as Rob and Chris have looked at them. We have certain qualifications that they have to meet, and a few of them did not meet those qualifications. But we have 15 currently, and Rob, just give me a thumbs up that 15 is where we're at still, right?
X plus 1, 16.
Okay, 16. So we're moving forward, and we don't currently have a way to know whether or not they are associated with Solar United Neighbors. But what I have had is one of the local installers that was contacted to do a bid. I gave them the information for Bryce and Solar United, so I said they will at some point be going through an RFP, so if you want to be part of that, here's the information. So we're doing some coordination, but we don't know how many of our opportunities are overlapping at this point.
What's the deadline for signing up?
For Electrify Everything or for theirs? Bryce, I think that you don't have a deadline at this point other than you needed 30 to move forward. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, we our target is, I think the end of August. I'll have to double check those dates. Our goal is to try to get most of our members through the summer, just so we can try to get everyone installed by the end of the year. But we'll work with the selected installer to firm up what that deadline looks like.
Do you have anybody signed up in Jackson County yet?
I think we do, but I'll have to double check our numbers. I can get back to you on that.
I think you said about 30 people had signed up so far. Is that right? In here? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. And so, yeah, I'll be happy to keep you all posted in terms of our progress. And yeah, we're setting up a weekly report out. So I'll be happy to forward that to whoever is interested at the steering committee and keep you informed on the questions and progress as we move forward.
I have one final question. Members that decide to go ahead and install batteries, maybe this is more of a question for Mountain Parks. Do you think there's like a peak load shaving opportunity if we can work with them on scheduling of those batteries to avoid our 5 to 10?
There is that potential. We have not explored it because nobody has contacted us yet with a battery that they would be willing to allow us to control to do peak shaving.
I'm gonna have one so you can experiment on me if you'd like.
Okay, well, we'll contact you.
Great.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Bryce.
I was just going to say thank you, and I appreciate Mark and Rob for the opportunity to present to you all, and hopefully we'll love to partner and coordinate and get solar in the community.
Great. Bryce, before you go, could you make sure you transfer the host back to me?
Let's see if I know how to do that.
If you go down under participants and you can select yourself, and then I believe it's more, and then you can change the host.
I think I just did that. All right. Cool.
Thank
Again,
you.
thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Bryce.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm learning more about Zoom than I wanted to.
You are. I'm impressed. Does anybody have any interest in being involved in that?
I signed up so I could watch the process and help with the selection committee if need be.
All right, you're not on the... Go ahead, Liz.
I also signed up because we moved away from having solar, so I am interested in having solar at our new place. So I signed up to see what the process looked like, and I'd already gotten a bid from another company, but I'll be interested to see how this works. It doesn't seem to me like there's going to be any conflict of interest having one of us or two of us on their selection committee, but I am sensitive to, while we're collaborating, this isn't a Mountain Parks program. I hope our members can differentiate between the two. I think the Solar United is a great program to help people get quality installations and simplify the process, but I don't want that to be thought of as a Mountain Parks effort per se.
I've been pretty clear with Bryce that, so like for example, they were initially considering calling it the Mountain Parks Solar Purchasing Co-op, and I was like, no, that's going to be too confusing. So I think they have been pretty careful in communicating it and choosing a different name to try and emphasize that they are distinct from the co-op while still trying to engage the co-op. So I do appreciate that he came to us and came to Mark and has been trying to coordinate instead of just kind of coming in.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying if 2 or 3 of us are on that steering committee, then there's more overlap. So if you, I mean, I don't know who else is interested in being on the steering committee, but I'm not certain how many of us should be on it and what the size of the steering committee is.
And I should
be on it. If you want to be on it.
No. I should actually clarify. I'm signed up for the co-op, but I actually didn't volunteer for the steering or selection committee or anything yet. So I'm more than happy. I actually think, Jeff would be great if he's willing to do that, given your experience as an electrician and whatnot. So.
I think it's important that we get a couple people on the committee. So think about it, and I mean, or unless you guys, I mean, Liz, Kristen, it sounds like do you guys want to be on it?
Only if you are, Jeff.
Okay, I can participate.
Okay.
So I think Liz brings up a good point on things like this, as far as if the board decides as a whole that Mountain Parks wants to send Mountain Parks board members as Mountain Parks board members to be on the steering committee, that's one thing, which is fine. It's also fine if just Liz and or just Jeff and or just Kristen decides on their own to be on the steering committee. It's just in that situation, if it's an individual doing it, Liz brings up a great point that you should all keep in mind, no matter what you're doing, whether it's something completely unrelated to this, that if the board hasn't decided as a whole that the board is sending you as a representative of Mountain Parks, then you are not a representative of Mountain Parks when you're there. You do have your fiduciary duty, but you are not representing Mountain Parks unless the board has decided that they're sending you in that capacity. And it's in Liz, in these issues, when it's electrical related, I think Liz brings up a great point that you have to be adamant and vocalize that and not just assume that they know that you're not representing Mountain Parks.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In that case, I might prefer not to be a Mountain Parks representative on the steering or selection committee, just in case we do actually wind up using their process to go solar. I'd like to be an individual if we decide to actually invest. So.
Yeah, I felt it did create some, it made me think about the, the conflicting interests, Levi, not just as you mentioned, but also if one were to be a participant in the program as well.
What was our time frame getting involved in that? He didn't really have one, did he, as far as?
No, I don't. I believe that he said that they're looking to put out the RFP within the next few weeks, and the steering committee would be the group of participants that would actually go through and help select the installer. But I don't know that the steering committee actually puts together the RFP, because Solar United, through their home office, which I believe is in DC, provides the expertise to create the RFP specific to this area.
So maybe we can all think about that, and if we want to if we want to send a board member to that, we can nominate that person next month. Does that sound okay? With everybody?
Yeah, can I ask so I had some technical issues and didn't get the majority of Bryce's presentation. This is going to be for rooftop solar, is that right? At individual accounts?
EV
Correct.
chargers, batteries, and rooftop solar.
Well,
Are
and
the
it
three
doesn't
options people can
necessarily
select.
have to be rooftop. I don't, do you know if it has to be rooftop?
I believe that, let's say that you had a really large yard and you wanted to put it in your yard as opposed to on your roof, you could do that as well. I think primarily what they've worked with is rooftop.
Yeah, I guess all I'm concerned about was whether it's behind the meter or if we're talking about community solar or anything like that.
No, they work behind the meter.
It's not be,
Okay, so let's put that on the agenda next month. We'll see if
Is
we can get
anybody-
somebody placed on that committee, one or two of us, if that's something we want to do.
Did Kristen or Liz, did you talk to anybody at Yampa Valley at all, or a previous client of theirs?
no, I've read about some of their stuff, but I haven't. I'll give the Yampa Valley folks direct.
I
call out
heard-
how-
Oh, go on. Yeah, I heard they had some issues up in Steamboat with their installer, so we'll wanna learn from that.
Okay. Let's move on to discussion action items, Mark.
Okay, the first item up is election of officers and our delegates to Western United and to Tri-State. And
CREA.
CREA, yes, sorry. Didn't mean to leave you out, Jeff. So we can go through the process of nominations for officers, it's president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. And then will be our board representative to Tri-State, Western United, and CREA. And if we have more than one potential person that is nominated, we have the ability, we have created a SurveyMonkey link that we can send out to the board members and they can vote that way. But if we obviously, if we only have one, then we don't necessarily need to do that. So Levi, are you the one that oversees this process, or is it Jeff, or?
Either way, I can do it if Jeff would rather, or I'm comfortable.
Why don't you do it, Levi?
How about we do the president first, and then whoever is elected president can handle the rest? Does that work, Jeff?
Can I make a motion?
You can.
Yes.
Yes, Carl.
Can I make a motion that all officers be elected as are presently seated?
I couldn't hear real well. What I heard was Carl made a motion to cast a unanimous ballot for the current slate of officers. Is there a second?
That is correct. And so that would be Jeff as president, Dick as vice president, and Justin as treasurer, secretary treasurer.
I'll second that.
Wait, I have a question. Aren't we all secretary treasurer?
Well, anybody who is not the secretary treasurer is an assistant secretary treasurer. So technically, yes, everybody else gets to be something too.
Okay. When we went to the CREA board meeting, there was some training, and in that training, I was asking, does anybody else do the structure where we have one person be secretary treasurer and then everyone else be assistant? And everyone kind of looked at me like I came out of the swamp. They're like, no. So
Yeah.
kind of given that experience, I would personally prefer if we had a separate secretary and treasurer instead of this structure, because it seems to be a little out of scope for what other co-ops do.
So can I wait, Kristen? I think I I'm not sure I followed that. So are you concerned about the assistant secretary treasurer positions, or are you concerned about one person being both secretary and treasurer?
Both.
Okay, so yeah, the whole assistant secretary position, I don't love either. Whenever we have something important that needs to be signed by a secretary and the full secretary is not there, I prefer to have at that meeting a secretary appointed by the board. So I would definitely agree with that. I don't think there's a legal problem with having one person be both a secretary and treasurer, but it's definitely up to the board who they elect to each of those positions.
So I would nominate myself to be secretary if someone else is willing to be treasurer, or vice versa. I have concerns because I haven't taken the training yet to do the treasurer part.
Sure, and so we do have a motion on the table. So, and we can continue discussion of that motion, and then we can vote on that, and then if that fails, then we can go that route. So the motion on the table is to cast a unanimous ballot for the officers as they stand now.
So Levi, let me ask a point of clarification. Based on Kristen's comment, if she wants to amend the motion, is she able to do that before we vote on the motion?
Yeah, anybody can always make a motion to amend the motion on the floor.
So Kristen, are you making a motion to amend the motion to separate the secretary and treasurer roles?
Yes.
Well, could I move to amend the motion to president, the current vice president, the current treasurer, and add as nominate as secretary Kristen?
There is a motion to amend the motion on the floor to be so that there is a unanimous ballot for Jeff as president, Dick as vice president, Justin as treasurer, and Kristen as secretary. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Dick. Is there any discussion on that motion? This is just to amend the original motion, then we'll have to vote on the motion as amended. Hearing no discuss. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, hold on, Carl has a question.
Yep.
What role do I have if I object to the amendment to my original motion?
You get a vote
you
get a vote against it, and yeah, withdrawing really isn't.
Withdraw your motion, but you can vote no on the amendment.
You can vote no on the amendment, and then you could vote no on your motion as amended if it passes. That's the beauty of a board. You each get one vote. Hearing no further discussion. All those in favor of the motion to amend indicate by saying aye.
Or thumbs up.
Thumbs up. I see Mark, Justin, Dick, Kristen, and I saw and Liz. So that's everybody but Dick. And those opposed? Oh, Jeff, what did you vote?
I wasn't sure if I could.
Yep. Yep, you can vote.
Jeff votes yes.
Jeff votes yes. All those opposed?
Carl votes no.
Carl votes no. Okay, the motion to amend passes. So the motion on the floor is to cast a unanimous ballot for Jeff, President Dick, Vice President Justin, treasurer, and Kristen as secretary. All those in favor? All those in favor, raise your hand.
We
Keep them up because I got it.
Justin, Kristen and Liz have raised their hand. Jeff says yes. And Carl says yes. So it's
Carl
unanimous.
says yes? Okay,
Yes.
all right, great. Okay, turn the meeting back over to Jeff.
Okay, so Jeff, we need to select a representative to the Tri-State Board, Western United, and CREA.
Okay, let's go ahead, Liz.
There's a quick point on this assistant secretary treasurer thing. Can we do away with it since we didn't nominate anyone to be assistant secretary?
It is done away with.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, done. Okay, let's start with Tri-State.
Michelle, sorry, I just want to make sure, Michelle, can you make sure that that's indicated in the minutes that there is no assistant secretary treasurer, just so we have that? Great.
Okay, let's start with Tri-State. Carl's our current board member. Is there anybody else, one, that's interested to, do we have any nominations for Tri-State?
Can someone remind me what the qualification requirements are? Doesn't like the Tri-State rep have to have met certain criteria? And or other reps?
I don't believe so. I believe you just have to be a setting board member for the co-op that you will represent.
Thanks.
So can I get a nomination for the Tri-State board member? Anybody want to do that?
Or
I
anybody
nominate
want
Carl Trick.
to, anybody want to nominate somebody
Yeah.
to do it?
I nominate Carl Trick.
Okay, we got a nomination. We have to second our nomination.
No.
Second.
Okay, we just have to vote on it.
Well, but you need to ask if there are any others.
Yeah, is there any other nominations? Okay, we have Carl nominated as the Tri-State representative. Can we get a motion for that?
Well, I think since you have the nomination, you don't necessarily need the motion.
Do we need a motion on that, Leva? I think we do, don't we, a vote?
Yeah, you need a vote. I would take Dick's nomination and Justin's second as the motion.
Okay, that's what I'm seeing. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
It appears not. We got all thumbs up.
Okay, motion carries. Western United, Dick's our current representative. So we will, if anybody's interested, or if somebody would make a nomination.
I'll nominate.
I nominate Dick if willing to serve.
I
I
am.
see. Okay, we have a motion by Carl and a second by Liz. All those in favor? Okay, thanks, Dick. And then CREA, I'm the current representative. Is there anybody else that's interested or would like to make it?
Jeff.
Second.
Okay. A motion by Carl and a second by Liz. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Did I forget something?
No, we got everything.
Glad that's over.
We have a employers council that's going to join. Rob, are they in the queue?
Hey, Mark, just a
Yes.
second. Didn't you also have to nominate for the meetings, the CFC and Tri-State's annual meeting?
Those are under item number 10, so we
Oh.
will get to those later.
I'm sorry.
Not
I
a
did
problem.
also, yep, I did just notice Jeff, we didn't pass on the special meeting minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Special meeting.
I'll make a
Look at
motion.
your, they're in your agenda.
The May 5th, is it 5th special meeting minutes?
Yes,
Second.
May 5th.
Well, was our special meeting?
May 5th.
Levi?
The FERC intervention,
Oh.
we met to end one of.
And I didn't get those to Michelle before last month's meeting, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have a mo,
It was,
we have a motion.
To intervene in FERC, is that what it's talking?
Liz, did,
But this is just the minutes.
Right.
We're just passing on the
Either-
minutes.
okay, but we need to approve them, right?
Approve the.
Yep.
Okay. We have a motion by Liz and a
Second,
second by Carl. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries.
Okay, I believe we are now being joined by at least one representative, Brian, and I think two possibly from Employers Council, and they are going to discuss the Pay Equity Act, which goes into effect January 1 of next year, and the work that they are doing with Mountain Parks to make sure that we are compliant with that. So Brian, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. So as you said, my name is Brian Ayers, and I'm the managing attorney for Pay Equity Services with Employers Council. And I believe Kimberly's, yeah, I can see her phone number actually. Kimberly Landon is on the line as well. Kimberly is our longest tenured data specialist, and so she and I have been working with Jessica and Mark on putting this together. There's a little bit of background. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Brian, this is Levi, General Counsel to Mountain Parks. So it sounds like this is going to be legal advice. To the extent it is, I would recommend that
Yes.
the board go into executive session. Would you agree with that?
Actually, Levi, I don't believe it's going to be legal advice. What they are going to do is talk about what is required, and Brian can correct me, but what is required, and then we're not going to talk
shoot, I
about
froze.
specifics related to what Mountain Parks will do. So
The what is
that-
required to me would be legal advice, though, Brian.
Well, it's not necessarily tailored to you. It's more of just a general read of the law. And so that's where I think it's yeah, this is more typical to what I would give in like a presentation at a conference.
Okay. So if you're
Um,
comfortable with it being an open
yeah.
session, I'll defer to you. Okay.
Yeah, I am there. And as he says, as Mark says, when we're not at the stage yet of having recommendations. We've got preliminary results where we have found where there may be further investigation required at this point, and then we'll generate. But we aren't at a stage there where we recommend anything yet. So I still, confidentiality is crucial here. I think, but I'm comfortable with. Yeah, we're not getting into any confidential advice piece, I believe. I think the portion at the end, it's up to you on, we could identify basically these are the positions where we found the disparity, and that's where I think we'd get into a potentially privileged area. So when we get to that, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of these are the actual job groups where we've identified disparities, then that's where I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, at this point, we don't want to get into that. We'll leave that for the report that you make to us.
Okay, and that makes sense. It's preliminary at this time, I think, to hear where we've got results and think, okay, well, we'll start to do the math, then we're going to need to do adjustments because, as I'll explain, we do still have now the legal factors to apply. There are, under the new law, you know, the different legal factors that can justify a pay disparity. That there's at least one that we think is likely to come into play now on the numbers that we've identified. So that's our next step. So Mark's right, it would be premature to discuss the numbers yet.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
So as background here, the way that the new law is set up, it establishes newly now the rights for employees to directly file suit against their employers if they're alleging pay discrimination. They used to have to go through the EEOC or through the Colorado Civil Rights Division, and that would be both somewhat of a time-consuming process, as well as you'd get essentially some sort of official investigation, some sort of official evaluation, essentially, of the claim. And so by the time it gets to courts, you've kind of weeded out the most frivolous ones because the EEOC or the CCRD has looked at them and essentially said there's nothing to find here. You have the right to sue, you can go ahead, but plaintiffs' attorneys know how to read that and know that that means this is likely frivolous. That's not that framework still exists, but now employees can bypass that and they can go directly to I feel I've been discriminated against and I would like to file suit. And then so that's one of the biggest changes under the new law. How that suit is then evaluated is of course going to be the other largest area. If the employee does successfully prove their case, if they win, they're entitled to up to 3 years of back pay, but then they're also entitled to liquidated damages. And that liquidated damages would be equal to the amount of back pay they're receiving. So it would double the payout essentially. And liquidated damages will apply unless the employer can prove this was a mistake made in good faith that led to the pay disparity. And so that's where we're seeing as one of the major arenas where the new law is going to be battled is what is and isn't going to constitute good faith, or what will the courts accept. And we're anticipating plaintiffs' attorneys are going to challenge quite a bit there. The one piece we feel of solid ground for what will constitute good faith is the legislature added an amendment to the bill that says if you conduct a pay equity analysis with the goal of identifying and correcting pay disparities within 2 years of the lawsuit, that can serve as evidence of your good faith. And so that's where we've been encouraging this analysis for that exact reason. We think there's really two purposes here. One is what the legislature is envisioning when they describe that safe harbor, that we're actually looking for where are your vulnerabilities and how do we correct them at this stage before the courts get involved. Because the other advantage there is a correction right now is perspective. It would look forward, it would be the salary adjustment that then would take effect going forward. And of course, if the courts get involved, there's the risk of back pay. And so that's the primary goal, is figure out where the vulnerabilities are and then correct them at your option instead of at the court supervision. The other one, though, is that this serves as evidence of your good faith. And so that in a worst case scenario where you do wind up in a lawsuit, you've got this protection in your back pocket and you can demonstrate your good faith efforts to comply. And so your liability is at least then capped at just the back pay. You don't have to worry about that damage multiplier piece. So with that in mind, we structure everything throughout this analysis to really protect that good faith element and make sure that if we're under scrutiny, if this is challenged in a court case, that we can show this was a good faith effort. And probably the most important pieces of that are, there's two foundational pieces that we'll go through before we ever get to running numbers. We settle on what are the comparison groups we're going to put together, and then we look at the different potential legal defenses and decide before we know what the numbers tell us which ones are and aren't going to come into play. And so we settle those so that it's clear to anybody who looks, this was an honest attempt to say, who do we think is engaged in equal work? And then once we've determined that, is everybody within these groups paid relatively similarly, or are there disparities that we should be addressing? But that it's clear that this is an honest effort, that it isn't, you're not reverse engineering here to try to reach a result. You're not manipulating the numbers. It's a good faith effort. And so Kimberly and I have worked with Mark and Jessica then to put together, we designed comparison groups based on having you give us a lot of information about your employees, not just job titles, but drilling down into kind of levels of responsibility. Who has supervisory responsibility, who oversees budget or budget or personnel authority, qualifications in terms of what level of degree is required and how much experience, and then starting to look for commonalities there. We'll look for, are there special certifications, for instance, that maybe should be looked at separately that makes a job title more unique. One of the challenges of the law is that the way it's written, it says that these comparisons have to be broader than job titles. So who is engaged in equal work will be larger than just who has the same job title. And so predicting essentially where we think the courts are likely to go there is really the difficulty here. What we've done, because the law doesn't take effect until January, so we don't have any any case law that we can build off of there, and we don't have, unfortunately, any administrative guidance from the state yet that we can take our clues from. Our experience has been that most states in this position will look to the EEOC at the federal level, both because federal law still applies, so you yourselves are still going to be subject to what the EEOC enforces, but also they have much more available in terms of guidance to guidance on how to enforce. They've got a lot of documentation available. It's stuff that we use quite a bit ourselves in kind of designing how are we going to evaluate this. And so we borrow heavily from the EEOC when it comes to things like how do we group, who do we think is likely to be engaged in equal work? And in particular, how should legal defenses be evaluated? Things like merit, pay, seniority, education that can serve as a justification under the new law for a pay disparity. But in our experience, if it's going to be held up as a defense in an investigation or in a lawsuit, there's going to be some scrutiny kind of how is this practice carried out? Is it carried out in a sufficiently formal, consistent manner where employees are being treated equal under it, or is it more ad hoc in the moment, varying from employee from situation to situation? So we use a lot of EEOC guidance, and again, our feeling there is twofold. One is we legitimately think it's the best available source to predict where courts in Colorado are going to go. Beyond that, though, our feeling is even if somehow the courts wind up in a different direction here, following different guidance, we are very confident that following EEOC guidance will be a good faith practice. That's a good faith effort. Again, it's a law you're still subject to, and it's really the premier authority in the country. So we do it because we're confident it's a practice that will hold up to scrutiny, and then that the protections that you're aiming for will be maintained by doing that. So we ask them these questions that I described about the different positions, and the idea is less tell us about the individual in the position and more tell us about kind of fundamentally how you think about the position. If the person holding this job left and you had to go fill it tomorrow, what would be the minimum requirements? What would you look for? And that's where we start to get kind of what are the common denominators. And we try to structure groups off a combination of that. And then knowing that the EEOC's habit, especially as you get higher in an organizational ladder, is to start to lump superficial titles together. If they're seeing managers, they like to lump managers, they like to lump directors. And there's work that you can do to prevent that where it's inappropriate, but it's good to be aware of where there's a vulnerability there so that you can either begin to think about should we standardize pay within these groups, or to think about where there's material differences, what do we do to protect those differences? And what do we do in particular to make sure those differences are clear to an outside investigator, that when they're coming in and they're looking at our titles and then they're starting to drill down into job descriptions, that they're themselves concluding, okay, that there may be some superficial similarities here, but these two positions aren't engaged in equal work. There's material differences in their level of responsibility, skill, and effort. And those are what at its core the law says equal work should be based off of: skill, effort, responsibility, that make this an inappropriate comparison. And so that's at its core what we're trying to do. Figure out where are there vulnerabilities where legitimately there is equal work, and we should think about how do we standardize the pay now and eliminate this disparity, as well as vulnerabilities that are more based on there's a risk of these positions being compared, but they shouldn't be. And so what do we do to make sure that they're not? So I have a habit of kind of going off for a while on this. So I want to stop myself here if any of you have questions, or I don't want to go too fast. I'm also fine to, you can interrupt me at any time. I actually used to teach middle school, so I'm very used to interruptions that at least here will be on topic. So please feel free to stop me at any point.
So if anybody has a question specific to the law or a general question, please feel free to ask. And Levi, if we get too far into the weeds, you will stop us.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm going to keep going. But yeah, again, please feel free to stop me at any time. So what we did is we, as I said, had Mark and Jessica give us this information around the different positions and some of the details about what goes into their level of responsibility, what goes into their qualifications, anything with, say, working conditions that are unique there and should be taken into account, because that can also factor into differentiating pay and differentiating jobs. And then we designed a comparison group based off of this. And so what we did with that is then go back and forth until we had a grouping that we felt was a reasonable approximation of what the courts would be likely to put together, what the EEOC would be likely to put together, and you all felt was also a good reasonable approximation of what your workforce actually looks like, who actually is engaged in similar levels of work. And so I'm just going to jump over to my other sheet. We put together a grouping that has like 10 groupings, it looks like. We would split the workforce essentially into 10 groupings. And it's based on things like the first group supervises personnel and manages an overall operation. It requires at least a bachelor's degree and progressive experience leading into executive management with at least 8 years of executive management. And then there's positions within that. And that's where I won't get into the individual positions within the groupings because I think that's probably where we'd likely want to go into executive session. But we'll have then we'll have a broad kind of descriptor for a group that indicates these are the levels of qualification, these are the factors that went into putting this group together. This essentially is the common denominator that binds these different positions together. And then there will be a listing of these are the individual positions where the employee salaries are going to be compared within the groups. And so, as I say, we went back and forth and then settled on these are the groups that we're going to go ahead with. We're both comfortable with these groupings, and we also, the important thing is we've settled on them before we run the numbers. We don't know what the numbers are going to tell us. This is just a good faith effort to say, here's who should be standardized. The other thing that these groups let us do, though, going forward is then they essentially give you a structure to avoid pay disparities down the line. If you're standardizing pay within these groups that we've established, where you have said this is where we believe equal work within these groups, employees within these groups are engaged in equal work. If you're standardized, if you're keeping them tethered together within there, that's how you're going to prevent pay disparities down the line.
Brian, I think you have a question.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Just
Liz?
a quick question, because I'm trying to wrap my head around this. You're doing these groups, you're trying to equalize pay or making sure there's no pay disparity amongst the folks in the groups. But later on that is our merit-based performance pay program. And so as long as we have, and maybe I'm getting too specific, Levi, but as long as we have a robust performance-based program and documentation, we can pay differently based on performance within that group.
Yes, performance is one of the new law breaks down 6 factors essentially, or really kind of categories, but that it says pay can be differentiated based on, and merit is one of them. And so here's where generally it might make sense actually to back up and talk about the process. What we'll do is we do look at those factors, and I can talk about that. That's probably where executive session may make sense. We went through each of the factors and did an evaluation basically of yes, we think this is likely to be at a level where it will serve as a disparity, and others where, based on the description, no, it's not, but what you're talking about going forward is a valid practice, and if disparities arose based on that would be a defensible practice. What we do is we initially run the numbers just based on the raw salaries, the raw compensation information that you guys have provided. And then any pay disparities where we've identified, that's where we'll then apply the legal factors. So if it were merit, we would get all of the merit information and to calculate basically what is the value of merit raises everybody here has received. We then factor that out so we can essentially compare the portion that's unaffected by merit and then rerun the numbers to see does a disparity remain. If the disparity is eliminated, then we're all set. There's no adjustments necessary. You don't have a legal vulnerability. If it does remain, we also then would just address the remaining disparity, not the larger one we started with, because that's essentially what the law is saying there. You just need to fix the unexplained portion. So I'll say too, the way that I'm connecting here, I don't actually, I won't see the camera. So if you have a question, please also, feel free to shout, because I may not. If you're giving any sort of, Justin, I just
we have another one, Brian.
Okay.
Just a
Go
quick
ahead, Justin.
A discriminatory case would still have to be based on race, religion, sex, national origin, all, I think it's six.
Some sort of protected class, yes. The gender would be enough, but yeah, some sort of protected class, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good question. Shoot, did I trigger some of those? No, I don't think so. And so when we look at those different factors, though, like merit, for instance, it's as Elizabeth had kind of said, is it consistent? Is it structured, or is it kind of in the moment? Is it something where there's some transparency, employees are aware of basically how this works? Because from the EEOC's perspective, what they're looking for is, if an employee wants to raise their pay using kind of the available functions, do they know how they would do that, how they would take advantage? And so, but yes, anything that is at kind of that threshold of structure and consistency is then something that we're going to then factor in and see, does this explain the entire pay disparity, or is there additional adjustment remaining?
Brian, does the new law apply to all protected classes, or is it just gender?
Gender, and the way they did it is a gender plus formulation is what they use. So it's, if there's gender and there's another protected class that you can bring in, then you could use that as the basis, but you need to have gender as the initial hook.
Okay.
And so the other factor there is it gets in, what we've experienced is it almost becomes a function of what kind of data is there available. We often will, and we did in this case as well, run by race, because race data is generally much more widely available. If you do have that collected, that's just more typical. On the other hand, for instance, we've never run one of these by sexual orientation because we've never had the data available. To have that on all employees, it's just, practically speaking, you don't have that. And so that's what would be kind of the limitation of any other protected classes. If you need to have kind of, in theory, the data to build the original claim on, from the plaintiff's attorney's perspective. Just jump back to our data. So we, as I said, we put these groups together, and then ultimately, once we had settled on them, that's where we ran preliminary numbers. And so that's where we are today, is we have run numbers on the groups, and this is where I don't know if you all would prefer to move into executive session. We don't have to get into specifics, but there are, I can tell you, depending on Levi, if you're comfortable, what
I wouldn't even,
okay.
I wouldn't really want to talk about anything,
okay.
even generally.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
Brian, I think what I would suggest is that we not talk about that, and we can put that into the report, and then we can discuss that with the board next month, and we can do it in executive session.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I'm happy with that. So more broadly speaking, we also, I've finished the review of the legal factors. And so that'll be a separate meeting that we'll have then with Jessica and Mark to just talk about, because there's a lot of, this is what we're doing going forward. And then, and where I've given an opinion, where I'm able on, yes, I think this will be a valid practice, or I think this will be a defensible practice, or here are concerns I have if there are concerns. Ultimately, we'll also have this in a final report for you. So where this is headed is we'll have both a statistical component and then a physical report for you, as well as I'll be available again to present like this. In that final report, we'll walk through really everything we've done. So it'll be from the start. Here's what the goals of the analysis were. Here's how we did our groupings. Here are the preliminary results at the stage we're at today. And then I think the more perhaps substantive nuts and bolts, we'll get into, here's our evaluation of each of these legal factors and our recommendations on any changes that should be made or any shoring up that needs to be done so that they can serve as defenses. We'll then get into, here's where any disparities were found. If they were legally explained, we'll get into that so that you have a record of that. If they're not explained, then we'll go further into that, and then we'll actually generate numerical recommendations on this is what it would take to close the gap essentially and to eliminate the vulnerability. The way that we run our numbers, and this is another one where we honestly just copy what the EEOC does. We run what's called a t-test, where it looks at the mean salary for males and females. And then if we do race, we'll look at minorities and non-minorities within the group. And then it compares where there is a difference in salary. It looks for statistical significance by running a standard deviation test. It gives a measurement in terms of standard deviation. The EEOC's threshold is any disparity that measures 2 standard deviation or more is considered legally actionable. It's considered statistically significant. And what that means is there's a 95% chance there's a correlation between the data points we're looking at, between gender and between the pay rates. And so we use 2 standard deviations as well, because again, it's one, we want to predict what the EEOC would say if they were to come in, and 2, we're confident that that is our best approach for good faith, to be held up as a good faith approach. And so that's where, when I say, as we look for the disparities that are identifiable, it's not any gap in pay that we're acting on, it's any gap that is essentially popping above that statistical threshold that we think would be identified as disparate impact in that regard. So we'll generate what the recommendations would be to, these are the actual numbers it would take to close the gap here and to eliminate the vulnerability. And then we'll write up best practices as well within that final report. And so then we'll have that available. We'll have a chart separate that has those numbers laid out. These are where the vulnerability was. This is where the measurement in terms of standard deviation there. And then this is the actual dollar amounts it would take to close the gap. A word too about adjustments if we get to a stage of where we're recommending equity adjustments. Those don't necessarily need to be an immediate thing. It's the way the law is written, it says that the analysis should be conducted with the goal of identifying and then correcting equity at any unlawful pay disparities. It doesn't, though. We're really the 3rd state to have a safe harbor like this. Massachusetts had the first one, and then Oregon had the second. Ours is more like Massachusetts, where it's broader, and so it doesn't necessarily envision you'll have already corrected the disparity. Oregon's, on the other hand, is pretty explicit about it. They indicate you need to have already corrected this in order to take advantage of it. We believe that it's likely to be read as if you've got a plan in place, if you've essentially said this is a disparity, it needs to be corrected, we've got a plan to make an adjustments, but for budget purposes, it's going to come over a 3-year period. Our read is that that's likely to be acceptable under the new law. One of the data points too that we're looking at there is the OFCCP at the federal level oversees federal contractors, and they also will do quite a bit of compensation oversight in that arena as they audit federal contractors. They, more than anybody, will publicize what they're doing, which is helpful for us. And so they've had a habit recently of when they reach a settlement and compensation, they set up equity adjustments as part of the settlement over a period of years. And so our feeling is, again, if the federal government thinks this is an appropriate way to deal with pay disparities, then kind of who is the state of Colorado to say otherwise? And so the OFCCP recently had one that was a settlement set up over a 5-year period. And so that's the longest that I've seen looking around. But I know there can be a worry sometimes if you get an adjustment, and particularly with the economy where it is right now, there's a lot to swallow to add that to the budget in a year. So I think that this is something where if you've got a plan you can point to in place of this is where it's likely to be, this is how this would be addressed, that we see as generally speaking more likely to be successful as a defense. So that's really where we're at today. Our next stage is to take a look at those legal factors that we've identified as likely to serve as a defense, and then see are they going to intersect with groups where there are disparities, maybe if we've identified disparities, and then to actually start to get the numbers on those. What is the actual impact, so that we can factor those out and rerun the numbers.
So are there any questions from board members for Brian?
Just a
Liz?
quick question.
Executive session.
My question, I think, is broad enough not to need executive session, I hope. But it's just a quick question on those 10 groups. As you ran them, were you seeing members of genders well represented in both groups? And if not, is that a concern?
That sounds like something we should do in executive session.
That makes sense. I can more broadly speak about like how we put the groups together But yeah, I won't get any of some groups. Or if you'd rather I avoided it altogether, Levi, I'm happy to do that too.
Well, the issue is if we go into executive session, we have to stop the live stream.
I see. I think I can answer that more generically without at all touching on what your groups look like. Generally speaking, we don't take gender representation into account when we put the groups together. We'll just look at is this essentially which job titles do we think are likely to be deemed engaging in equal work. And so sometimes we will have groups as a result of that are all one particular gender or the other. But our read is that when we put those together, we don't think that anybody from outside the group has a credible claim that they can bring to say the people in that group are engaged in equal work than me, than I am, but are paid differently.
And just so the board is aware, we're going to continue working on this, and then next month we will bring the preliminary report to the board, and Brian will be available to discuss it, but we'll discuss it in executive session. You know, how we actually physically went through this process, any adjustments that they believe we should make, and we'll discuss it in much more detail. The point of today's discussion was just to give you an overview of the law and how it will apply to Mountain Parks as we move forward. So with that in mind, any other board questions? It does not appear so, Brian, so thank you. And Kimberly, thank you, although you didn't get to speak. Yeah, and I think we have something scheduled for next week to review, and then we'll bring this back to our board in August.
Okay. Yeah, thank you all for your time today. And
right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into really, once we have executive session, getting into the details. Levi, thanks too. I always appreciate just having somebody keeping an eye on you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Krista,
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I think she was waving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was waving goodbye.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Let's take 10. Take a break. Be back here 10 minutes. Don't be late, Liz.
Wait for it,
Hi, Jeff.
Okay, we got everybody back?
Yeah, it appears we do, yes.
Okay, let's keep going. So we're back in action items, discussion items.
Yeah, 6.2, which is policy C1, the communication policy. You have it in your packets, and it's up in the rotation to be reviewed, and we made no changes to the policy.
Everybody get a chance to look at it?
Motion to adopt the policy without any changes.
So, second.
Motion by Dick and a second by Carl. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Kristen has a comment.
No, Kristen was just voting yes.
Okay, it looks like the motion carries.
Okay, on to
Talk about making that one public.
Oh, yes, we need to, I don't see any
Right.
reason not to have it be public. Staff doesn't have an issue, so we can make it public.
Okay.
Okay. Item number 3, policy C2, the donation policy. That one, we are suggesting some changes and mostly moving things around within the groupings. There were, I think, 3 groupings, and we have moved things from other organizations into the category of community organizations. And some of them that were what we thought to be duplicative, we combined some of, so for instance, what used to be G was Senior Citizen Program. We moved those to Rural Health, Crisis Centers, and Senior Citizen Programs. The one other thing that I would point out is on, I think it's about page 4, there were a number of contribution request guidelines. Those are more procedural in nature, and so we took them out of the policy, and we have a form that we provide to somebody if they're wanting to ask for a contribution, and that information is covered within the request guidelines.
I move to approve. I like this. I like the fact it simplifies the whole policy, and I think it sort of is going in the direction where we're trying to take our tariff and everything is just streamlined, simplified. Good job.
I like it too. Could we have a little discussion before a second and a motion? Just curious where our donations typically come from and what this applies to versus what it doesn't. Because I think there have been times in the past when we have donations coming out of what is it perceived to be a different pot. And I'd like to know, does this cover all of Mountain Parks and its subsidiaries donations, or is this only for monies given by Mountain Parks Electric?
I'm going to attempt to answer it, and then I will have Levi check me on that. This is not all of the contributions that we make as an organization, because some of the contributions come out of the charitable trust, which is funded by the Roundup program. Some of the contributions or donations come out of the education fund, and that is funded by unclaimed capital credits. This policy is primarily focused on, but not wholly focused on, the discretionary budgetary line item that is donations for Mountain Parks. So every year in the budget, there's a line item that the board approves for donations, and it used to be referred to as the general manager's fund. We're not referring to it internally that way anymore, because Rob and Chris and Michelle are the ones that are primarily getting these requests And if they are things that we have done in the past, they will do it. If there are questions, they will ask me about it specifically, but I didn't feel it was appropriate for the general manager to basically have a fund that he or she just gave money to community organizations. So Levi, I see we lost your picture, but okay. Does this policy, would it also cover Mountain Park Services? I think is maybe part of Kristen's question.
And or the education fund, because it's like a fund and not a separate trust, right? So what's this covered? What is it not?
Yeah, so practically, I would agree with Mark as far as how it's been implemented in the past. Given Kristen's question, I think it does make sense to clarify that, if that's the way the board wants to go, clarify that this does not govern the education fund, which is governed by its own set of parameters. And then no, it would not govern Mountain Park Services. Did that answer all those questions?
Justin has a
And
question.
and I was just going to say, while we're at it, if we're going to, since we're calling out the education fund, we might as well, just for clarity, also call out the charitable trust as being separate.
Well, and we have policies for, I mean, A1 is the policy on the educational fund. So we have a separate policy for the educational fund.
Yep.
And I guess we have A2 is the charitable trust.
Yep.
A3 is Mountain Services. So, I mean, yeah.
Practically and just administratively, Liz, I think it does make sense to put it in here, just so, because oftentimes people find what they think is the answer to something, and they don't, and me being among those kind of people, you find the donation policy and you assume that covers those others, and you don't then look for those specific education policy or charitable trust policy.
Right.
So that'd be my recommendation.
I would move to amend Liz's motion to approve to include a line in this policy clarifying the scope of funds that are donated to which this policy applies. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And more specifically, Kristen saying that it applies to funds other than education fund, charitable trust. And,
Yeah,
and
specifically,
charitable trust.
I would move that we amend, add a line specifying that the charitable trust is governed by policy X, that the education fund is governed by policy Y, and that this applies to others donations.
And I would say that's a good idea, except for then we really need to make sure we track our policies as we get rid of policies, because then we're going to have to go back and make sure A1 is combined with A2. Because then we're
Also
gonna
a
have
valid
policy
point,
doesn't-
Liz. Yep. Yep.
But I think we should, I think Kristen's point's a good one. I'd add the green power funds in there too, maybe. Yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe a sentence, moving to include a sentence that charitable trust funds, educational funds, funds coming from Mountain Park Services are subject to, or maybe are subject to other policies or something, and leave it broad enough so we don't have to 5 years from now find out that a policy's gone and someone's mad at us because we didn't. Anyway.
Okay, staff will add that line. My question for the board is, do you want us to bring it back with the added line next month, or are you willing to approve it knowing that we will add the line?
We want to bring it back next month? Or do we want to go ahead?
Come on,
and approve it?
Justin.
I'll bring it back. I had
You
a
wanna bring
question.
it back, Justin? Go ahead, Justin, I couldn't hear you.
It's 0.5% of the line item for donations is what's approved in this amount. So Stacy or Mark, what is typically that amount?
Actually, that is the limit. This year in the budget, the board did not approve up to that limit. I believe, Stacy, the amount is like $12,000, $15,000, something like that.
Yes, that's correct. I think it's 15. I can check for sure, but.
And so 15 does not equate to 0.05% of the budget.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second, correct? To approve.
Didn't get a
Actually, I think we had a motion. I don't know that we got a second.
Yeah, just quick point of procedure. You should get a second before you do discussion.
We have a second.
Said that I
I'll
second
second.
his amendment or whatever it was.
Kristen amended, but seconded.
What's that? The motion is to approve it without.
But there wasn't a motion and a second, so that's why you typically want to get the motion and second before you do discussion. So you have, without the second, there's actually not a motion on the floor.
Right, I don't believe anyone seconded my motion, so my motion wasn't real, and I'm not sure anyone seconded Kristen's.
Perfect, so there couldn't have been an amendment, so just do a new motion with Kristen's language in it.
Well, but before we do that,
Or not,
Justin,
if we're gonna bring it back.
I believe Justin suggested that we bring it back for consideration at the next, and he is nodding his head yes, so.
And I do too.
And so does Carl, so we will table this item and staff will bring back an amended version of it next month.
Okay. Liz?
Quick question on what Justin brought up. The way the language says right now, it says we'll establish an annual budget amount of. Should we say not to exceed instead of that? It would give us a little more flexibility.
Can you say that again, Liz, please?
Well, in E, which is the annual donation budget, the board of directors will establish an annual budget amount of 0.5% of the line item budget, excluding power costs, wages, and benefits. For the country, staff added that excluding power costs, wages, and benefits, it looks like. But I'm wondering if we should just say, rather than, I'm curious how the rest of the board feels about putting a binding amount in there in the budget, requiring a kind of that placeholder versus requiring staff to have a not to exceed amount in the budget. If in front of that 0.5%, we said not to exceed. So that would give a little more flexibility if things were really tight.
I think what you could do is just take out that 0.05 or 0.5% and just say the board of directors will establish an annual budget amount
right.
Of the line item in budget and excluding. And by the way, the purple that's in there, that was in the policy before. It just never changed.
Okay, I guess that's my philosophical question to the rest of the board is, do we feel like that 0.5% is part of our caring for community, or do we want to have, and so we're drawing a line in the sand saying this is our caring for community approach, or do we want to have more flexibility in that number? And so I just throw that out.
I liked the up to language.
Dick, where did that 0.5% come from? Do you remember that?
We had established at a point like $25,000 at one point, and one year there's something came up that Joe wanted to donate something else, and we decided to that's about 0.5% of the budget, and we just threw it in there. There was no real significant reason for establishing that as the number. It just seemed to work at the time, and it was just a guidepost for Joe saying, this is what you've got if you want to make contributions. there was no real reason for establishing that specific number. It just seemed to fit.
Is everybody okay with Liz's suggestion then to make that more general when staff brings it back, just so they have a little more guidance, so we don't have to send it back again? Is everybody okay with that?
I see heads nodding.
Okay. All right, we'll table that. It'll come back, for next month.
Okay, item number 5 is ratification. We had the email exchange with the board, and the board approved not having a specific limit on the number of financial assistance that we could provide, to the number of members that we could provide financial assistance to. So the board just needs to ratify their decision that was made via email.
So we will need a motion for that ratification.
Move.
First one, Justin. We got a motion by Justin and a second by Liz. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Hands.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
Okay, item number 6 is ratification of the FERC settlement collaboration. We again had an email exchange for the board to allow Mountain Parks to participate in settlement discussions with the other interveners. And there are, I believe, 7 others at this point. And so we just need ratification. We have been involved in this, and there have been hundreds of emails that have now gone back and forth trying to pick a date that we could actually all talk, which I believe now is August the 4th. But we just need a motion to ratify the board's action related to FERC settlement collaboration.
Move to ratify.
Motion by Liz,
Second,
second by Dick. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Okay.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Item number 7, as part of our support of the Grand Foundation, we have the ability to field a team for the Grand Classic Golf Tournament, which is August 28th and 29th. And I need to know if any of the board members have a burning desire to play on that team. Carl has indicated he does. Any other board members want to play on the team? So we would just need to come up with 3 other people to play with Carl.
Tom Cyphers and Greg Guthridge, past employees, would like to participate.
Okay, then we would need to come up with 1 other one. So we will put that together. Item number 8, in your packet, there is a copy of a letter that was sent from the Colorado PUC, or actually Department of Regulatory Agencies. The Colorado PUC is requesting that they do a rate survey, and it was initially limited to investor-owned utilities. They have reached out to CREA and to the co-ops to see if we would be willing to participate in this survey as well. And there are a couple of pages beyond the letter that show you the information that they are requesting. Most of this information is available publicly on the CREA CEO meeting. We've discussed this a couple of times, and I believe last count there are 10 co-ops that said that they're going to participate. I just want to ask the board if they have any objection to us participating in this survey and providing this information. Like I said, most of it's available publicly anyway.
So only 10 members of CREA are going to participate?
Those are the ones that have indicated that they would participate. Some of the others, I think, we're still considering it, but
Nobody said no.
nobody has said no at this point. And frankly, I don't think it would be a good idea for co-ops to say no, but I'll just I just wanted to make sure the board didn't have any objection to us providing the information.
Is everybody okay with that? I'm not sure we need a motion.
No, I don't think we do. I just wanted to make sure the board was okay
I think,
with that.
sounds like we are.
Okay, item number 9 is the Rural Energy Savings Program documents for the $10 million loan that we have. I believe that we have, if you update your call to order, maybe not. We had sent out documents for this. Did we sent the documents out, Michelle, to the board members, but we hadn't included them in call to order?
Correct. And they are on there. They should update. It might take a minute. I have them
Yep,
listed
they're there.
as secretary certificate and note execution under, there's rest documents and then those two.
Okay, yeah, actually, I just hadn't updated, so they are there. So what the board needs to do is there is a secretary certificate which comes with a resolution. RUS requires that the board specifically approve us accepting the $10 million loan related to the Rural Energy Savings Program. And then there is the note document that is there as well. So
this is just we just need signatures on this.
well, you need a motion to approve the resolution to accept. So if you update your rest documents, the loan document or the loan agreement is the first one.
So we need a motion to accept the documents that you all have in front of you.
First 27 page.
Moved.
Got a motion by Kristen,
Second,
second by Dick. Is there any further discussion? Liz?
Yeah, just a quick question on Article 6, the negative covenants. Levi and Mark, when you guys go through that on 6.2 and let's see, no, 6.3 and 6.4, they talk about it's the limitation of contracts and limitations on employment and retention of general manager. Are those standard RUS boilerplate paragraphs that are already in our RUS loans?
Which section?
Article
6.3.
6.3 and 6.4 on page
19 and 20.
19 and 20.
19 and 20.
I'm reading it, Liz. You know, I'm not, 6.3, I'm not sure that is in the mortgage. Or the, I guess it would probably be in our typical loan contract if it was in a document.
Six four seems like it's in all the RUS things that I've seen.
Right. We have to go through the
Yeah.
process of getting approval for
Right.
contracts.
That's the work plan project. Yeah, you have to have your work. 6.4 does, I believe, is standard. 6.3, I'm not sure, Liz. That I don't recall that language.
That was the only thing that was a little worrisome to me. But then I was, well, this is probably just in all our contracts. So,
Yeah. Well, and that's if we're in default. So 6.3 is only triggered if we're in default.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, well then that's not a worry.
right. I wasn't concerned about it when I reviewed this the first time, and I'd already forgotten about it. And yeah, it's because I mean it's only in the case of default,
Okay,
which we don't plan on doing.
right. And then my other question, and I sent it to Mark, but based on their debt service coverage ratio, I didn't get out my audit in time to see where we were, but that number isn't actually in the Schedule 9B, but I bet Stacy knows it and how much
Did
room
you-
we have.
Well, see, Liz, did you see my response this morning? You're right, it is
I-
not specifically addressed in Schedule 1, but one of the sections in Schedule 1 says that we will meet all the requirements of RUS, and the debt service coverage is that. And so, Stacy, do you want to, can you tell us what the debt service coverage is and that we are far in excess of that?
They're far in excess. I think they require 1.2. We're about 3.4 times. So we're,
So, and this ties a little bit into the strategic plan, which is one of our goals to maintain a healthy financial status. And I'm like, maybe this is one of those indicators that we track on an annual basis. You know, I think we already do in the audit, but we don't really talk about it. But like, okay, here's what we're required to do. It's referenced in one of the policies, I think, but just keeping an eye on that so that we're all aware of where we are on these numbers, because I certainly forget. I mean, I think we're good. And then I'm like, well, how do I know that?
I run them every month. I'm happy to share in addition to my financial presentation. So I'll add that.
I have no objection to this. I just had those questions. Thank you.
Okay, so we did have a motion and a second. Anybody else, any other comments? All those in favor? Looks like we got everybody, so the motion passes.
Real quick, so hey, Jeff, on that secretary certificate, there are a few dates. So there's blank for who the secretary was, which now I'm glad I didn't just stick with who that is. So Kristen, you're going to have to sign this, and all the officers will need to sign the second page. And all the blanks need to be filled in for the dates and everything on that secretary certificate. And then I will need to see it, and the corporate seal needs to be affixed to that. And I will need a copy of that emailed to me so that I can provide the opinion of counsel, which will be the last thing needed before we can get our funds.
Did I come in after the call today? Will it be ready?
I will, I'll make arrangements to get everybody's signature that isn't currently here.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so then we would move into staff reports. Scott is not here, but you have his engineering report, and if you have any questions on it, I will attempt to answer those questions.
Carl?
The carbon power and light issue, I see they're going to do a line extension, and then we have to make agreement for them to provide power for us. The whole issue with the Laramie River thing, is that all mute and gone and no further discussion on it, or what?
It is not all moot and gone. However, they have decided not to move forward at this time because of some of the issues related to Tri-State in Colorado. They don't want to acquire additional system within Colorado at this time. Their board is interested, but they weren't willing to move forward just yet.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on to operations and safety.
You've got Rich's report, and if you have questions for him, I'm sure that he would love to answer questions.
Any questions for Rich? Rich, do you want to give your safety report? so we can approve that?
I sure can. Not much to say about the safety report, other than we're continuing to work safe without a lost time accident. We're at 386, 449 hours. No near misses or close calls to report, which is exceptional, I believe. Guys are doing a great job. And then I would like to put a little bit of emphasis on that, these weekly calls that we're doing. I think it's really helping kind of bring the three districts together, and communication has been exceptional in my opinion. That concludes my safety report.
Make a motion to approve.
We got a motion by Carl to approve this safety report. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second by Dick. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Looks like the safety report is approved. Thanks, Rich.
And one other comment that I would make, Stan's last presentation was this week, and he did a safety topic related to CBD and what the requirements are for Rich's group as well as for the non-operation staff. Great presentation and I think very timely.
You're talking about the oil?
CBD products in general, and how they relate to our drug and alcohol testing program. And, you know, if you happen to use one of those products, even if the product says that it has no THC in it, if it spikes on the test, doesn't matter what the product says, it's what the policy is, and we have a zero tolerance policy.
So if you put that oil on you, you can absorb it into your system and then it will come out on a urine test?
It may. It depends on the product, and the issue is that these products are not necessarily regulated by anybody, and so the claims that they make are not regulated. And so it could say that, yeah, you won't ever have a problem, but part of what we were explaining to staff is that if you use one of those products, you're taking the chance that if you are tested, it may show up on the test, and we have a zero tolerance policy.
Okay,
So,
finance.
moving on to Stacy, you have her report, and I'm sure she would love to have questions. One of the things that I will say is that we have a new tool through NISC. It's Mosaic. Stacy walked me through setting it up. It provides a dashboard that you can see a lot of different things related to employees, related to delinquency, and in looking at that, our delinquency is actually within historic norms. It's on the higher end of that, but it's still within the historic norms. And so we're not seeing some of the delinquency problems that some of the other Colorado co-ops are experiencing.
Yeah.
Any questions for Steve?
As of today, I showed delinquency 106,000, 30 days or more, which is pretty close to, a little above normal, but close. Not too bad.
Stacy, on your comparative ratio dashboard, the last item, bottom right, which is aid to construction combined with work in process, that's a change in how we handle it, but it'd be nice to know what that figure is.
Sure. I can look that. Oh, no, I can't.
Just curious, you know, it says combined with work in process, which is a new way you're handling it, but it still would be nice to know what aid to construction was for this year.
Year to date, I can add that in my report if you want me just to do aid to construction and a posted amount.
Yeah, just because it's compared to prior years, it'd just be nice to have that. It's, you know,
sure,
just the chart's complete. I don't need to know it now, but you know, if we could have it on there, it'd be good.
Okay. Yeah,
All
I
right.
can add that.
Thank you.
For
would it make sense to start tracking work in progress numbers?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's where it's tracked now. Comparatively, it's been tracked different. Yeah. But I have the amount, so I can separate it out here.
You noted in your overall report that operations overhead is down. And I just wanted to mention that, that down except for the legal portion, Levi.
That's what I was gonna say. You stole my thunder.
So Stacy, just overall, our margins are up despite.
Yeah. If you go to my page called margins, May year-to-date comparison. So I try to do common sizing for all the past years. So you can see 15 margin at this point in time was 12.2, 16, 13, and then jump ahead to 2020, we're at 15.44% margins. So it's a large percentage, but what we're seeing is we have a little mismatch of when we pay our power costs, which I talk about every month. Power costs are continuing to decline. And then we have lagging revenue that we'll see the following month. But overall, what we're paying for demand is down $500,000. So we don't charge the residential class a demand fee, so that when our cost is down, it's a pickup or an increase to our margin directly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and for what I'm seeing is the small and large commercial are down and way down.
Yeah, way
so
down.
I wonder if this might suggest anything to us about our small and large commercial rates and how they are not addressing demand. Like if losing a huge amount of commercial sales increases our margins, maybe that means we're not necessarily appropriately charging demand fees, or I don't know. It's an interesting finding.
I hear what you're saying. I don't know if I could draw that conclusion yet without more data, but it's large commercial and small commercial are less than half of our margins. So they do represent a smaller portion of our sales.
Are they more of our demand charges though?
They coincidental peak charge is, there's probably about 20 members that we charge coincidental peak. So when I talk about demand in tri-state, there's a super small number of large commercial members that we recoup that coincidental peak demand charge for, and it's a pass-through. So it's
so that's only a few of them, right? Most.
Yes, yeah. So the other demand charges that we do recoup are, so we pay for a demand charge $19.20 to Tri-State. We recoup $5.45 from some of our other large commercial. And then the really large one, we pass through that demand $19 exactly.
I thought this was interesting, and I thought it was too soon too to try to draw the conclusion. But I thought it was really interesting that we have, an overall revenue loss, but and an overall decline. Well, the residential sales goes up, but the power cost goes down. And my thought was it's because of the residential use is more even and perhaps not as spiky and driving peaks. But I don't know, it's some of it's maybe that small commercial, but till we get all our metadata management stuff done, I don't know if we know that, but it's an interesting what's going on right now. And I do want to point out that we have the margins look good right now, but Mark did just send out that email about whatever it was, 42% of the households missed their July payments, not to Mountain Parks, but nationally. So I think this is a weird time as far as finance goes, I think we look good, but it's weird. It's hard to know what's going to happen. And to me, it's hard to sort of look at what's going on the ground and then looking at some of the more basic fundamentals in the economy and reconcile the two.
Yeah, and I think that to keep in mind that the May, June timeframe was when things were reopening. And so I think June, July, August, when we get the financials for those months, that's going to be a better predictor of where we will end up the year at, as opposed to where we're at now, because we started really good, and then we had hit March, which was COVID, and we had a little bit of effect at the tail end of March. In April, we took a hit, but then May started to come back a little. So I think the true picture of where we will end up is probably sometime June, July, August, in those months, because those will be predictive of whether or not things will stay the way that they are. And assuming that it doesn't get worse. And that the one reason I sent out that link to that article is that we aren't necessarily seeing that that we know in Grand or Jackson County, but if you look, everything seems to be normal, except it's not really, because there's a lot of people that aren't making their house or rent payments.
Okay, any other questions for Stacy? All right.
And Joe is not here either, and so you have his report. If you have any questions, I will attempt to answer those questions.
All right, seeing none.
It appears not. Thank you for not asking questions. So then we will move on to Jessica and the HR report.
How you doing, Jessica?
Good. How are you?
Do you have a nice tropical breeze there, or is it warm on the beach?
It's pretty warm.
Any
Do
questions?
you guys have any questions on my report? I have some things that I wanted to talk about, but first on that.
Well, why don't you go ahead and talk about what you want to bring up, and then
Okay.
that might generate some questions.
Okay. So as you all know, I'm going to be out for August. So Michelle is backing me up on many of the HR duties that need to be addressed in that time. So she'll especially be helping with directing employees to the resources for benefit questions with the new plans. She'll also be handling leave administration, payroll support, and recruiting and hiring support. Things are slowing a little bit down on the recruiting and hiring, thank goodness. So hopefully that won't be too much. And then Mark is going to be the contact for big picture items like questions around the why behind moving to the new benefits program, as well as the performance management and compensation program. And then I wanted to touch on, so I had hoped to have a more thorough compensation review for you all today, to kind of talk about what it might look like for 2021. But Employers Council is still working on their compilation of the REAs in Colorado and each of the job codes and compensation that goes along with it that we used to base our new system on. So not ready to talk about that yet. They did give me a preliminary report actually this morning. So my hope is that I can provide some updates to Mark, and then he can decide how to kind of disseminate that to the board. So instead, I wanted to share a couple articles that discuss what we may see when it comes to compensation trends for 2021. Related but separate from what Brian was talking about with the pay equity analysis. And that will also come into this entire discussion. So quite a few moving pieces, but we'll get through it. So the first one I wanted to share is from the Colorado Workforce Consortium for Northwest Colorado. And the title of the article is "Current Labor Surplus Does Not Mean That Jobs Will Be Easy to Fill." The COVID-19 pandemic launched an economic crisis that has resulted in record high unemployment across Northwest Colorado. May numbers showed that there are nearly 7 unemployed workers for each available job. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that jobs will be easy to fill. Many people were laid off in the leisure and hospitality and food service industries, and those workers may not have the skills to fill the available jobs. So the persistent labor shortages prior to the pandemic may continue to exist for in-demand occupations as the same skills gaps exist. So that was the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second one is about line workers specifically. So they have some survey predictions based on some salary results. So the article talks about the market for a journey line worker continues to experience pressure with pay levels increasing at a pace greater than the general labor market. The supply and demand of skilled line workers, the transitory willingness of candidates to move frequently or commute to fill positions, and the presence and influence of union negotiations to establish attractive pay rates are some of the factors behind the upward movement of this market. Weakening of these factors for more moderate or slower wage growth is not expected, despite the abnormal conditions of the general labor market due to COVID-19. So bottom line, the conditions that prompted the actions that we took last year within the retention and recruitment proposal still exist at this time, at the same time that a recession most likely exists as well. So while we may not be insulated from the financial impact of a recession, at this point, it appears that specialized groups of our employees, including linemen, may well be insulated when it comes to opportunities that they have for other employment. So my recommendation is just that we keep all of this in mind as we navigate our compensation discussions, and we keep our same eye on retention and recruitment and the budget that we pivoted to for last year. There may come a time down the line where the broader economy will depress wages overall, but we do not expect that to be the case for 2021. So just some things to keep in mind. Does anyone have any questions about anything I was talking about?
I think that's helpful, Jessica. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Rob, you're up. Anybody
Hey, good
got anything? Go ahead, Rob.
Okay. Good morning. The only thing I'd like to add to my report is things are changing, I believe, a little bit with the fair situation, specifically the Middle Park Fair in Kremling. Now, they do have, they announced to me last week anyway, that they were allowing 350 people to attend the fair. However, because of COVID, they acknowledge that this is, could change very quickly. The one thing that they said is any vendor that has a booth at their fair has to disinfect every surface anyone touches at all that stops into a booth, which I followed up and asked, well, how many vendors are planning on attending? And at this point, they have 0 vendors. So with that and the disinfecting guidelines and the uncertainties, I don't think it's going to make a lot of sense for us to be the only vendor there. Now, they did acknowledge they're going to have like a 4-H food booth and people wearing protective masks and serving food like that. But so we're not doing that, but we are still planning on buying the cow there to give away, the beef, the quarters of beef. They're doing that a little different this year too. Usually that auction is on a Friday night. This year, they're doing a 2-day auction. The Friday is not in the evening, it's in the afternoon where you can make bids online. And then whatever the total of those bids are, those are the bids that go into the next day. So you can show up in person or call on the phone and make a bid on beef there. So Mark, is going to have some fun, I think, with that. So that's what I can tell you about the fair. Now we're still investigating, and I believe Mark had it in his report, options to hopefully get our Tesla out there for ride and drive events, but it still doesn't look like we're quite ready to do that with all that's happening. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have about my report. Happy to answer.
Carl?
Rob, elaborate a little, please, on the virtual town hall and how you feel, how successful it was and how it went. I see some of the stats in your report that ours had more hits or whatever that is than anybody else, but tell me a little bit about it.
The reaction we've received, Carl, has been positive. We do think, you know, although I think today it was 427, so a couple more people viewed it. We think there's obviously a majority of our members that still haven't viewed it, and that's why Mark's August article is promoting that. We know a lot of people are still respond to our magazine and what Mark is writing in there. And so we think there's a lot of good things they can learn about Mountain Parks Electric by watching that town hall, our financials, the new programs that have introduced. So I think we should feel good about the numbers. I don't think, you know, it's, you know, we've broken the internet with it or anything, but comparatively for a annual meeting or a virtual town hall, we've done pretty well with people responding to it.
Okay. Actually, we have more views than we generally have people that attend in person at this point. So, and as Rob said, it's the focus of my article in August, right?
Correct.
And I believe the title is "If You're Tired of Binge Watching Netflix."
Mark had to ask me which month it was because magazine deadlines are crazy. We had to get in the August edition material before the end of June. So yesterday, Mark and I were talking about his September material, which is due before the end of July. So it's kind of interesting with the magazine deadlines.
When you talk about views, does that mean that the viewer watched the whole thing, or did they just click on it and click off?
It means that they clicked on and they watched at least a portion of it. It doesn't mean that they watched the entire 24 minutes of it.
Okay.
So Rob, where's the MISA TSTAT program going to go, do you think?
Yeah, so we like the results we saw. And to be honest, Chris and I were thinking, you know, this is valuable. We learned some things. We learned the value to Mountain Parks Electric for doing this. We have looked at other utility smart thermostat programs, specifically Poudre Valley. We know that they offer incentives. Now, they don't do a electric baseboard heat smart thermostat program. What they offer is a Nest thermostat program, and they'll give you $50 bill credit if you enroll, and then they give you a $30 bill credit every year after that you stay enrolled, and they are able to control your Nest thermostat. So Chris and I think where we are on this, we think there's value. We've monetized that a little bit. One of our uncertainties about this particular product is we like it because it addresses baseboard heat, which we think is a real need for people in the Mountain Park Service area still. Probably about 6,000 of our members have electric heat. But to greatly expand this program, Chris thinks we might be able to do that without an incentive. I'm a little more skeptical about that. I think people are going to want an incentive in return for us turning down their thermostats. Even though in this pilot, we saw that when we did that, they mostly didn't notice that. But I would say this is kind of the tech adopters that like that kind of opportunity. Most people want some additional benefit for themselves. So I think we would probably, that scenario of needing to offer an incentive to grow the program changes the economics. So right now we're looking, if you self-installed under our program with no incentive, about a 2-year payback, about a 3-year payback or longer if we have to pay for the installation. And then if you add an incentive on top of that, the payback's even longer. So that's the Mountain Park side. And then the other fact that we don't really charge a residential demand rate, you know, there's not a correlative bill savings immediately with our rate structure for residential consumers. So to make a long story longer, I think, you know, we know that Tri-State, if we continue to stay with Tri-State, has a history of changing peak hours and times. And if for instance, once again, peak hours came to us in the morning, if you saw that graph in the report, that's when our true peak is usually in the morning during the heating season. There would be more value to Mountain Parks for a program like that, which might carve a little space for us to give that incentive and make this work with the MISA thermostats. The other real concern we have is about MISA themselves. They're relatively new company. The platform in which the utility uses to control these is okay, it's not great. And their support for utilities, we're a little apprehensive about. So I think what we learned here is, again, the valuable lesson of the technology works, the value to Mountain Parks Electric, and this is a technology that we think we need to keep our eye on. But for now, we think we need to invest our time and resources with perhaps the Electrify Everything program, but always keeping an eye on this in case our wholesale power structure changes. And now we know kind of the values we need to make these programs cost effective for both us and our consumers. And we might need to respond by tweaking our rates a little bit to give them an incentive that way.
Okay.
I thought the power graph was just, it provided a very cool insight into heating and all of that. I thought that's really well done. And your comment that our true peaks are in the midwinter season are in the mornings is an interesting one, because I always have our peaks being in the Friday and Saturday nights, because I'm thinking of our peaks that coincide with Tri-State's peak window. And I'm wondering, sometime can we get sort of what those our true peaks versus our build demand peaks look like? I mean, there easy way to show
we have that. Yeah.
I was, because I'm looking at this going, what's driving that Friday night thing if it's not everyone coming and turning their heat on? And then I'm like, oh, well, because we're not billed necessarily in the morning, on Sunday morning when it's cold. I'm, as a director, not paying attention to that peak.
Mm-hmm. You're correct, Liz. So we really focus now on when Tri-State says their defined peak hours are. So we focus between noon and 10 p.m. But there, you know, we have usage patterns outside of that, and in the past that was a lot more important to us. So it does change. We have morning peaks, we have evening peaks. But in Chris's report here that he put together, and I helped him a little bit with, we can see that, you know, that one graph in particular showed a morning peak, and we were controlling during the evening. But I'd like to add one more thing about this. Another concern we have about this technology, even though we hit the peak and controlled them successfully, I think it was 6 out of 7 times if you throw out the March month because of the change in everyone's behavior because of COVID. This particular technology puts the pressure on us to get that peak narrowed down to a 2-hour window. And again, we're not using any predictive analytics or technologies that do that automatically. We're using historic peaks and looking at weather. And so this was another learning piece for Chris and I in this process of how you pick out those peaks, understanding we're never going to be perfect at it. But this puts more pressure on us to get it correct than the Aquana device did, where we were controlling it for 4 hours and we had a little more wiggle room there. But this is really a 2-hour window, and then when the temperature drops, those heaters start to turn on, and then the value to Mountain Parks for controlling them goes down after that. So
it's getting you ready for energy storage.
Any other questions for Rob? Thanks, Rob.
Okay, thanks.
Bills for payment. Any questions on the bills for payment? Okay.
What, Jeff,
Yep.
I forgot, we were having so much fun, we blew through, selecting delegates for CFC, NCSC, and the Tri-State Board.
Oh.
So, if we could, go back to that for just a moment. The first two, CFC and NCSC, those are virtual meetings, but we need to select a delegate for those. And then the Tri-State, of course, is in person, but it's in Wyoming, so.
So the Tri-State one, Justin brought up the point that they wanted the board member to be that.
They have requested that the co-op send its board member, its Tri-State board member, but
Why?
they're allowing you to identify whoever you want.
What's the reason for that?
There's no voting issues.
And
There's nothing to
Was-
vote on. To limit the attendance, they were asking to have.
Oh, gotcha.
Since they're gonna be there.
And it's in conjunction with the board meeting that's already there.
I recommend that we let Carl be our representative. Considering what's going on with the pandemic and everything, you know, if he's going to be there anyways, I would suggest that we do it for him unless someone has an objection.
I mean, if there really is nothing that's being voted on, why are they even bothering?
Why do you need a delegate?
Yeah.
The bylaws require we have an annual meeting.
Yeah.
Resolution.
We don't need a delegate. What happens if Mountain Parks doesn't
so I guess-
send a delegate?
Yeah, if there's no voting issues, it shouldn't matter.
Carl, are you gonna,
Is this
will you physically go to it? You'd go to it? Okay. That was another concern of mine.
Just, what if we don't send a delegate? If none of the co-ops send a delegate, would they have a quorum? I mean, I'm all for sending, Carl, if you're going to go to the meeting anyway, I'm fine with you being the delegate as long as there's absolutely nothing that other than approving last year's minutes.
That's
Annual
what
meeting
they
minutes.
said.
Did they add something at the last minute?
I think issues can come up from the floor, yes. They have in the past, so whether that happens, I can't speak to, but.
Yeah, I believe that in the event that something does come up from the floor, it would be a good thing for Mountain Parks to have a delegate there. Just in case.
And the issue for Carl there is the dual roles issue. That if that issue that arises puts Carl in a position where his fiduciary duty to Mountain Parks would require him to do one thing, and his fiduciary duty to Tri-State would require him to do something different, that puts him in an untenable position, and that's why I've recommended in the past that the delegate be someone other than the board member. If there's no voting issues, I don't see a need to have a delegate at all. If there are voting issues, then that's a potential issue. So that's my 2 cents.
Is the issue that the tri-state bylaws require the delegate person? Carl?
You broke up there.
Is the issue that tri-state requires the delegate to be there in person?
I don't know if the delegate needs to be there in person, but we have to notify Tri-State in advance if we are going to have a delegate.
And the delegate can be picked 2 minutes before the meeting if it's so desired.
So
I guess my question is this. Is we have a delegate, can Tri-State have an annual meeting that delegates attend virtually?
They could potentially, but since they are doing the board meeting there and the committee meetings, they added the annual meeting to that because they assumed that they would already have representatives from all 42 of the co-ops.
And I don't think they're, at this point, equipping the meeting for virtual broadcast, but I don't know that for a fact.
But we do have Dick did nominate Carl, but based on what Levi's saying, it might be prudent that maybe we, like we've always done in the past, is to nominate a separate delegate. Are we thinking we want to go
When is
that?
the meeting?
It is,
August 3rd to the 5th, it'd be the last day of the 5th.
yeah, August the 5th.
And that sounds like it's gonna be in person. We don't know if you can attend.
Yeah, you can attend, but it's in,
No, I understand, but you either attend or that's it, or you can attend via webinar as well.
based on what I've seen thus far and what Carl knows, I don't believe that they are planning to allow for virtual attendance. They may have a call-in number where you could, listen, but when in the past several months when they've done call-in numbers, it's an AT&T thing, and everybody is muted. So in order to participate, you would have to go through their process. So,
Dick, you've been the delegate in the past, haven't you? Typically for that? Tri-state delegate? Or
No.
has it been?
He has not. I've
one-
always recommended that it not be him, and I believe you've always followed my advice.
Dick,
No,
though, not,
Dick, not Carl.
I was in the past, yes.
Oh, sorry.
I've been once as well, but I just want to say I have a little level of frustration about this because Tri-State is asking us to appoint our Tri-State rep to be the delegate so they can be there in person. We know there's this fiduciary issue, and they're doing that because of COVID, and it makes sense to have fewer people at that meeting. But at the same time, an issue could come up from the floor that could conceivably run counter to Mountain Park's interests, put our delegate in a difficult position. And so we are essentially, in order to take care of our interests, asked to send a delegate in person, an additional person to that meeting, rather than trying to do this virtually so that if something does come up on the floor, we can act, that delegate can act accordingly and protect Mountain Park's fiduciary.
If someone wants to go, that's fine. If not, if you insist on having somebody other than Carl, I'll volunteer, but I think that might be a good idea to have somebody go, not necessarily me, doesn't make any difference. Somebody else has a real interest in going, I'd support them.
Self-nomination, Dick?
No, I don't want to self-nominate. If someone wants to nominate me, I'll be more than happy to do it. But if there's someone else that has an interest in it, that would like to go, I leave it up to them. Not a problem for me. If nobody volunteers, I'll take it on.
Liz, were you volunteering?
No, I wasn't. I
She was
have an
gonna
interest in.
nominate Dick.
I have an interest in going in attending. I have I just think it's going to a large conference in the beginning of August, given what's going on with COVID. I just, I don't want to get back to my home or my community. So
Was not appointed
I
delegate?
guess I'm out.
Okay. Is there any other interest? If there isn't, then I would take Dick's self-nomination.
Or Kristen, do you want to go? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to,
I'm building a house. It's
Well,
a little hard to leave.
I'm not too worried about the COVID. I just got back from Mexico and I'm self-quarantining. I work from home, so if I go to this, when I get back, I can self-quarantine. I'm not that concerned. I've been in and out of 3 airports, and so far, knock on wood, I'm okay. So unless I come down with something, I'll go. Not a problem.
So do we need a motion for that? I think we do, don't we, Levi?
I'll make a motion to have Dick be the delegate.
Thank you. We got a motion by Justin and a second by Mark. All those in favor? Carl? Okay, motion carries.
Will
Okay,
someone,
so
will someone get me the detailed information on when, where, and do I have to make any other arrangements for a hotel or anything? I don't know who has that info. If they could forward.
I will get it to you, Dick.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay, so for the CFC special meeting, to approve being able to do a meeting virtually, is there anybody that has a real burning desire to be the virtual delegate for that?
So it's just to approve?
Yes.
Oh, I'll be the delegate. I have a burning desire.
Thank you.
I make a motion to fulfill Liz's burning desire.
We have a motion by Dick and a second by,
Make sure we put those 2 things together in the minutes.
Probably
Thanks,
not.
Dick.
Good. You're
second
welcome.
that, Carl?
Second.
Motion and a second by Carl. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Okay, and then the last one is the NCSC annual meeting, and it is also a virtual meeting. And it does not appear that there's much other than there is the opportunity to vote on representatives to the board, but there's only 1 candidate for each position, so.
Does anybody have an interest in that? Can you do it, Mark?
Yeah, I can.
As manager?
Yes.
Does anybody have an interest in that? Okay. Looks like Mark's gonna do it.
Okay, that.
We need a we've made a motion and everything else. We better get a motion to,
So moved.
we have a motion by Liz and a second by Justin. All those in favor? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, so now we can move on to the open board forum.
Okay. Liz left. Dick, you got anything else?
They had another record month. We haven't had a meeting. We have our next meeting, I believe, the end of August. So they're doing well. Their addition is coming along, and there hasn't been much other items discussed. So you probably won't get any detailed report until our September meeting.
Hey, can you talk about that email that came from Poudre Valley about increased compensation for Western United board members? I guess it was those officers, or?
Yes, someone made a recommendation that the officers get additional compensation, excuse me, over and above the normal per diem. And they said they would take that up at the next meeting. There's a board committee that does executive compensation. I believe they were going to look at it and make a recommendation if there'd be any increase for the officers of Western United. No decision has been made yet. It will be made.
It came from the board, their recommendation, Dick?
No, it came from a member at the board meeting, and they took it under advisement, and one of the committees, I wasn't sure which one, is going to come back in August and make a recommendation, and then the board will vote on it. That's all that's happened so far.
What is the current compensation?
The current compensation is $600 per meeting. There are 4 meetings per year.
So it's not a daily per diem, it's just a per meeting?
Well, it's per meeting, right? If you attend the meeting and, whatever has to happen, you get the per diem. It's not any guarantee, similar to what we have in our board meetings.
Okay. Liz, did you have anything? Green Power? No?
You need to unmute yourself, Liz.
Oh, the next meeting's August 11th,
Okay.
and we'll continue to figure out the solar cares and DC fast charger issues if the grant goes through.
Okay, you're breaking up pretty bad.
They're gonna look at solar cares and the DC fast charger.
Carl? Tri-State?
Yeah, we had a tri-state meeting, covered the annual meeting. We're gonna have strategic planning, for a day and a half, and then a half a day of board meeting, and then the annual meeting we just talked about. They stressed that no voting issues would come up at the meeting. Dwayne gave his report. He's on lockdown because of contact in New Mexico with a person that tested positive. He tested negative. Ellen Connor is retiring, she's the kind of the IT person there. And her duties are going to be reassigned to existing staff, no new hire. Casey Becker would not support the legislation for Tri-State due to one environmental organization, which was the Environmental Defense Fund. And the gal's name was Pam something. Leroy Garcia, Governor Polis, all were in favor of going ahead with the legislation, but Casey Becker said she would not bring it to the floor if Tri-State couldn't please Emily, so it's not going to go anywhere. There was a meeting of a small group of managers, and Mark may know more about that, and that was the day of the meeting about recommendations of cost reduction and governance. And I don't know how they were picked. I assume you weren't one of them.
I was not, there were some that had volunteered to participate with Tri-State staff, and there is a group within Tri-State that has been tasked with finding cost reductions.
Right.
And there were, I want to say it's like 3 of the managers that, and it's one from each state, well, maybe then it would be 4. 4 because it's one from each state that would participate with the managers to, the Tri-State Management Group to try and identify cost savings.
Okay. We had a COVID update. We're still safe at Tri-State, and they downgraded our risk level. The partial requirement contract was filed with FERC on July 5th. 9 members out of the 42 that are members responded to the survey. 6 are interested, 3 are not. October 6th, they expect the open season to start, and then it'll stop in December. And that's with the 300 megawatts of to bid on for partial requirements. Basin won't let Nebraska co-ops take advantage of the partial requirements, and I can't speak to the reason why. But
Was it state law issue?
I don't know whether, I can't believe Basin could stop them completely, but I think it's a contract issue, if you want to know the truth. But I don't know. And over the phone, the questions and answers were, not productive to getting the reason why. There was controversy over not having the contract committee review all the issues for the partial requirements contract before initiating, and some of the issues were patronage capital, voting rights of members or partial requirement members, rebates, special rates, and member benefits.
Carl, did
That, go ahead.
I'm sorry, did they give any indication when is the contract committee gonna, okay, go ahead.
Staff recommends that they continue patronage capital and that partial requirement members and full members vote on all issues. They retain their board seats. There would have to be a bylaw change to accomplish that because the bylaws now state that if you are not a full member, you lose your board seat. And it wouldn't pertain to special rates or rebates. Budget staff will present the budget for approval in September, and November will be the long-term forecast presentation. They talked about the Wyoming Test Center, $5 million invested, no further investment. A new policy was instituted, Policy 122. It's essentially a blanket approval for members to sell at wholesale prices for electric vehicle charging stations, which is prohibited by the contract under Section 7A at this point. It passed. The Stiegel DC tie is obsolete. Gonna take $75 million to replace. It's pretty critical for if we join a regional, an RTO, like SPP or Cal ISO. So what they decided to do, Tri-State is the operator, Basin is the one that kind of provides most of the money. And they looked into it and they can update it instead of rebuilding, which is just, you know, putting a patch or a Band-Aid on a wound. But that's what they decided to do. Ken Reeves said the DC Circuit said FERC cannot delay rulings anymore, has to answer within 60 days, as the Federal Power Act says. Levi may know more about that than I do. And that's kind of everything else, everything that we covered.
The 60-day thing is interesting. Would that apply to, like, for example, I know there was some DMEA or, well, some other co-op in the past had a PURPA issue that was decided by FERC and then Tri-State appealed or something, and that's been in limbo for years. So would that apply to cases like that, or is this more narrow in scope? I have to decide on in 60 days.
I assume it's for all rulings, but I don't know. Like I said, Levi could probably answer that better than I can. But I assume that they won't be able to delay any of those things for years and years and years as they've been doing now, because the Federal Power Act said they have to, you know, act within 60 days. And to answer Jeff's question,
Are they gonna?
to answer Jeff's question about
Are they
the
gonna
contract.
add some more staff?
I don't think that's necessarily a staff issue.
What?
She asked if they were gonna add more staff, in FERC in order to, decide things quicker.
Go ahead, Carl.
To answer Jeff's question about the contract committee, they want to have another session of the contract committee, but not until they lift the restrictions or the COVID stuff disappears.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything for open board forum? Mark sent out the CREA notes. I just wanted to add, Kristen had brought up, if they were gonna have classes. Kristen, I don't know if you looked over the CREA notes, but there's
It looks like there's gonna be an option, is that right?
yeah, there's dates in September on there. 4 classes, so, they're limited to 30 people, so if you want to, attend, if anybody, you probably better get on it soon to get
All right.
registered. Okay? Yep. Okay, anything else? How about old business? Is there any old business? Any new business?
I didn't know if we needed to talk more about the wildfire resolution that Mark had sent out.
I don't know that the board needs to, CREA sent it to NRECA, and it is going to be on the agenda for the region meetings, which will all be virtual. And I believe it's the week of October 12 through 16. And I expect that it will pass because it's an issue that affects a lot of co-ops.
Do we need an RECA delegate?
Not yet, because they haven't decided when our region meeting will be. And when they send that out, then they will also at that time request that we name a delegate.
Yeah, thanks for your work on the wildfire, that piece.
Subcommittee.
Subcommittee. Are we, as things are getting drier, are we taking some steps, Rich? I mean, it seems.
We haven't taken any steps yet, but we're considering them now.
I mean, it seems different because the national forest has had a ban more due to COVID than weather conditions during the spring. So that's just sort of like an indicator that's a little different this year for us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
When you say you're considering things as things are drying out, like what exactly does that mean?
We put some circuits on non-reclose, so it'll just trip off one time rather than trying to restore power 3 or 4 times. It affects our reliability. It makes troubleshooting when we have an outage a little bit harder because a lot of the components that we have on our system don't work right when we have that on non-reclose. So it's a risk that we need to take.
Carl?
Rich, about the standby generator, we had an issue on the Laramie River here when they had the fire over there, and we couldn't secure a standby generator quickly enough or whatever. Do we have one lined up, or is that an issue?
It's not an issue. We were just looking at, it was actually going to have to be a fairly good sized unit to provide that backup power. So I think we could have secured one. It was just in the short amount of time that we needed to get it for that area.
Okay, I thought there was an issue with getting one that big. I apologize.
Yeah, I think we would have found it. It was just, like I said, the timeline we were under was pretty quick, but we would have found something.
One other thing under kind of new business, general managers report under the tracking model for the strategic plan. I think one of our main priorities is zero contacts, but I didn't see those boxes filled in as to the reporting frequency on zero contacts and on, so, yeah.
I think that the tracking sheet, it should have had all of the things started on July 1. They were, we put June 30 of 2021 as the end date, and semi-annual reporting. Obviously, with the safety report and with Rich's report, we report those on a monthly basis. The semi-annual is an update to this tracking sheet, not necessarily when we will report, because I think, as I mentioned, you know, we'll report every month as we go through on strategic initiatives that help to support the plan.
For sure. I see that in you guys' reports.
Okay, anything else? Do we have a need for a Mountain Park Services meeting?
Daisy, Mountain Park Services? No.
Okay. We do need to go into executive session for a number of topics. Is everybody good with moving forward? Do you want to take 5?
Can we take 5?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's,
Well, and that will give Rob an opportunity to stop the live stream and other issues that he's gonna have to take care of, so.
okay. How about
Hey,
11:20?
Mark, about
Yeah.
that, or did you, I may have missed it, did you guys already dismiss the meeting?
We have not, if you wanna go ahead and get a motion to go into executive session, then we can stop the live stream. And the motion should cover legal, financial, and personnel matters.
Oh, only one thing before we do that. Did you want to do the officers for Mountain Park Services or leave that for next month? Doesn't make any difference there. Nothing was posted as far as on their meeting, so we ought to post it and then do it next month.
We'll do it next month.
Okay.
Carl's made a motion that we go into executive sessions for the reason that Mark stated. Do we have a second? A second by Liz. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, it looks like we're there.
Okay, and we'll take a 5-minute break, but, so Rob, if you can go ahead and cease the live stream.